Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 219. I'm testing negative to influenza. I'm on the loose, and this is the Planet Extra podcast. I am a host of Planet America on ABC Australia, and this is an official podcast of the ABC. So say hi to the Ombudsman for me. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can find us on YouTube at the PEP with Chaz and Dr. Dave channel. You can also see highlights on the PEP Clips YouTube channel, and we're on Facebook at the Chaz from Planet America channel, where you can also find timestamps and show notes in our blurbs, both YouTube and Facebook. And if you leave a comment under our current episode video, we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us or blue sky us at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PepChaz Dr. Dave. If you want to chat to some fellow peppers, you can join our Discord server. It's on the screen right now or in the blurb of the podcast. But if you want to contact me or Lockie the Lucky privately, why not email us? We're going to break. I'm going to read them finally and respond to you. The address is producer@pepthepodcast.com. The address again is producer@pepthepodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe for all that peppy goodness. We're recording this at 3:11 p.m. on Thursday afternoon, but for now, let's turn to the guest, he's another man, other than Dr. Dave, who will never raise the stakes on inconsequential views. I'm talking about Mr. Moonlight himself, Jared Mondschein.
Thank you very much for having me for a third time.
Time has dragged since the last time, Jared. We miss you in PEP. I'm glad you could grace our new studio with your wonderful presence. Can you just remind the new peppers who have just tuned in the last, say, 2 months, who you are, what you do?
My name is Jared Mondschein. I am the Director of Research at the United States Study Center, but similar to what you call Dr. Dave, or who you call Dr. Dave, I am not here representing the U.S. Study Center whatsoever. All I am representing is a very cranky man who is from America but now living on this island in the ocean. And so I represent no institution but my own crankiness.
And also, we should say, you are kind of the American me, aren't you?
Yeah. The way I introduce you to my friends is I've never met someone who sleeps less or reads more than me, and you are the first. So or walks more than me. I think I might have the record for 24-hour distance, but you probably beat me over like the long term in terms of like regularity. Yeah,
in terms of if we add up lifetime steps, I've probably got you covered. But you definitely had a big 24 hours.
Yeah, 100K. I don't know if I'll beat that anytime soon, but that's maybe I'll go for 110 this year. Who knows? 2025.
And we keep on finding more things. The more we talk, the more we find, he's kind of like me. It's a bit creepy.
Yeah.
We're a bit like that Spider-Man meme. Anyway.
Yeah.
Jared, tell me what you're grateful for.
Well, firstly, I have to say I'm grateful that you joined my Thanksgiving this year, my Australian Thanksgiving a few weeks ago. That was an honor to have you and a few friends and colleagues and family. And I just, as those who haven't heard before, I like to do Thanksgiving twice a year because Thanksgiving is so important to me that I do it, in November as a normal American, but I also do it in late May, early June, because that's Thanksgiving weather here in Australia. And I just think it is really important to be grateful as much as possible. But in addition to you joining me for Thanksgiving and my other friends and family and colleagues, I also am grateful for the peppers I've met. So I did 2 episodes of PEP in a row. After that, I got more compliments in real life from people than I've ever gotten on any other media engagement. For the record, it is literally my job to go on ABC and Sky and everywhere else to talk about America. But the niceness of people who listen to PEP and then come up to me and tell me about it and ask me about it. And one kind woman even said she was starstruck to speak to me because she listens to PEP so much. I was blown away. No one's ever said that to me before. But I think I have to say, I have one favorite pepper who I've spoken to, and he is a 10-year-old boy named Alex, who might be our youngest pepper. I'm not sure if you know of a younger one.
I don't.
And he just is an inspiration, and he is what I hope more kids are like in the future. Just so fantastic to have such passion at such a young age for such a important topic.
Well, Alex, I look forward to listening to your podcast in my retirement. That sounds great. Hi, Alex. I'm grateful for Thomas Massie. And this is
I know you would be.
Yeah, of course I am. And look, this is obviously related to the topic which we're going to start off with. But just in general, I am grateful for Thomas Massie. I don't agree with everything Thomas Massie has to say. In fact, I disagree with quite a lot of it. We are both libertarians, but everyone knows, take two libertarians and you have two very different points of view usually.
Have you ever shown the video of recent libertarian conferences, like the one where the guy got naked on stage?
I think we did show the video.
Okay,
of that,
just
yeah.
making sure.
Yes. Yeah, look, he's a very conservative libertarian. I tilt a little to the left. We are quite different. But I admire his personality as much as anything. Firstly, he's very consistent. No matter how inconvenient it is for him, he sticks to his principles, which is rare in American politics. It's rare in any politics. He doesn't buckle under pressure at all. It would be hard to be constantly saying no like he does. He really does. He just keeps on doing it. He is relentlessly cheery about it as well. In an environment where politicians frequently abuse each other and take cheap shots at each other, he basically never takes cheap shots. He doesn't make personal attacks at all. He just politely stands firm on policy and talks about policy. And he doesn't ignore people. He doesn't stay away from debate. You should look at him on Twitter. He's just arguing with people all the time, but in a really polite, non-defensive way. It's great. Like, he is actually an example to everyone in that respect. And he does it with a great sense of humour. I've tried to get him on Planet America. We haven't succeeded. Hopefully one of these days, especially after this lolly job I just gave him, hopefully he will come on Planet America.
He doesn't strike me as a guy that cares a lot about foreign policy. And his forays into foreign policy are usually just criticizing U.S. foreign policy for being a bit too aggressive, I guess, is one way he would term it. Yeah, I don't think he gives a lot of hoots about Australia, but I'll keep on trying. Let me give you an example, though, from this week of the way he rolls. After Trump launched his airstrikes on the Fordo nuclear facility, Massie, he didn't go into histrionics. He just simply tweeted out, "This is not constitutional." That's it. People started obviously taking the bait, tweeting back at him, abusing him, attacking him. After a while, he tweeted again. When two countries are bombing each other daily in a hot war and a third country joins the bombing, that's an act of war. I'm amazed at the mental gymnastics being undertaken by neocons in DC and their social media bots to say we aren't at war. So they can make war? Fair point. The whole thing, you can just it always frustrates me. I know that we're early on, but you just change the party of the president and change the party of the member of Congress, and they say the same thing. It doesn't matter who's president. They're always going to say this. Continue. And
then he stays there, and he responds to a lot of posters directly, totally politely, which I like to see. Then Mike Johnson tweeted out, "The president made the right call and did what he needed to do. Leaders in Congress were aware of the urgency of this situation, and the commander-in-chief evaluated that the imminent danger outweighed the time it would take for Congress to act. The world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, which chants death to America, simply could not be allowed the opportunity to obtain and use nuclear weapons." And Massie replies directly to him with, "Why didn't you call us back from vacation to vote on military action if there was a serious threat to our country? I introduced a war powers resolution on Tuesday while Congress was on vacation. We would have had plenty of time to debate and vote on this." Once again, great point, made politely. Before long, Trump had enough of this, and he jumped in with his big thumb to squash Massie with, is a big breath, "Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky is not MAGA, even though he likes to say he is. Actually, MAGA doesn't want him, doesn't know him, and he doesn't respect him. He's a negative force who almost always votes no matter how good something may be. He's a simple-minded grandstander who thinks it's good politics for Iran to have the highest level nuclear weapon, while at the same time yelling death to America at every chance they get. Iran has killed and maimed thousands of Americans and even took over the American embassy in Tehran under the Carter administration. We had a spectacular military success yesterday, taking a bomb right out of their hands, and they would have used it if they could. But as usual, and despite all of the praise and accolades received, this lightweight congressman is against what was so brilliantly achieved last night in Iran. Massey is weak, ineffective, and votes no on virtually everything put before him. Rand Paul Jr., no matter how good something may be, he is disrespectful to our great military and all that they stand for, not even acknowledging their brilliance and bravery in yesterday's attack, which was a total and complete win. Massey should drop his fake act and start putting America first, but he doesn't know how to get there. He doesn't have a clue. He'll undoubtedly vote against the great big beautiful bill, even though non-passage means a 68% tax increase for everybody. What bullshit. And many things far worse than that. MAGA should drop this pathetic loser, Tom Massey, like the plague. The good news is that we'll have a wonderful American patriot running against him in the Republican primary, and I'll be out in Kentucky campaign really hard. MAGA's not about lazy, grandstanding, non-productive politicians, of which Thomas Massey is definitely one. Thank you to our incredible military for the amazing job they did last night. It was really special. Make America great again. So that was an excessive response, I feel.
Are you going to go into the numbers of how it's not just rhetorical attacks on Massey?
I am just about to say that the very same day that he tweeted that out, his advisors, Tony Fabrizio and Chris LaCivita, started a super PAC, Kentucky MAGA, devoted to taking Massey down. Literally, its only mission, this super PAC, is to find a primary opponent for Massey and fund them. LaCivita said the PAC would spend whatever it takes to defeat Massey, and the plan is to rally around one opponent so they don't split the field against Massey like has happened in the past. And what was Massey's response to this? Both the tweet and the news about the super PAC, and he wrote one line: Donald Trump declared so much war on me today, it should require an act of Congress. That's a great response.
He's very good at Twitter. He's very good.
And great sense of humor, like in the situation. Yeah, it's I like the guy. What a champion.
And to his credit, this is his sixth term of office, I believe. All the insiders are saying this level of support for a primary opponent may be hard for Massey to overcome. So this might be it.
Yeah. John McLaughlin polled the district already. Didn't take long. They found 52% of people in his district would support a Trump-endorsed candidate. 23% would support Massey. LaCivita said Massey's long-time opposition to President Trump's working family tax cuts and really anything to do with President Trump is coming to an end. Thomas, little boy Massey, will be fired. What a terrible nickname. As you note, they have tried before and failed, but this might be a better opportunity for them, I feel.
Yeah, this isn't a new fight between Trump and Massey. Massey was pretty angry about Trump's COVID relief package. He also was one of the only 6 Republicans to endorse Ron DeSantis,
yes.
Which always goes over well with Donald Trump. And this very well could be the beginning of the end of Massey's career. Because obviously, there's a Chinese saying you kill the chicken to scare the monkey. Yeah. He has to make an example of Massey. He has to. You can't do this much against Trump. And it'd be one thing for some Republicans who are subtle in their opposition. John Thune or Mitch McConnell will just make little digs here or there, or they won't vote, but they'll vote against Trump, but they won't actually come out with rhetoric. But the fact that he just goes for it every single time on Twitter, that is just next level. And Trump has to make an example out of him, or he thinks he has to, but I'll be very interested if they are able to pull this off and get him out of office.
You're absolutely right. The thing about Massey is he's got no fear. Like there are people who take Trump on timidly. Massey ain't one of them.
No, not at all.
Bottom line for the grateful, you don't have to agree with the guy, but if everyone in Congress took their job as seriously as he takes his job and applied themselves like he does and had his personality, America would be a much better place, let me tell you. And I'm grateful, Tom, for your existence. Come on, Planet America. We'll get you through. Got some correspondence here. Just a few because we got lots to talk about. Jared here. Decongestant correspondence we're going to start off with. Thanks to all the well-wishing about my influenza A last PEP. It was more concern than well-wishing though. It was more concern about my grateful last PEP was about how much I loved decongestants. Look, I'll just read from Matt. Chaz is grateful this week had me concerned. Due to the little-known addictive/physiological dependency characteristics these sprays can induce in users. Effectively, the relief they provide is short-term, meaning users have to reapply them semi-frequently. After using them for more than 2 days, the nose begins to become used to these chemicals and will stay blocked without application of this wonder drug every few hours. If a user doesn't apply the drug, they begin to feel as if they cannot breathe, and it can take the nasal passage a few weeks of this before returning to a normal level. This has led to communities online, and he cites a Reddit page, dedicated to trying to beat addiction to these products, with some users using them for more than 20 years daily. They're actually rather dangerous, and a disclaimer for the next PEP would be warranted. If you're going to use them, never use them for more than 2 days at a time. That is correct. I should have probably said that. I forgot that I was talking to people. I've been using these for 40 years, and I know full well, I haven't been using it continuously, but as in, like, once again, those who know me know that I have constant breathing issues. I get pneumonia several times a year. I get flu a lot. I've had all kinds. The good news is I know how I'm going to go, but the bad news is along the way I'm going to get a lot of congestion. Anyway, and so I know my way around these decongestants. And when I was a kid, and I had some really bad sort of croup and issues, I was first introduced to a few of them, and I did not practice what Matt was preaching here, and I used it way too much. And yeah, you get rebound. Bad rebound. There's no doubt about that. And when I was a kid, I started to like pour the stuff down my nose, trying to get it unblocked, and then I sort of weaned my way off it, which was good. He's absolutely right. You don't want to have it for more than 4 or 5 days in a row. He said 2. He's talking about if you use it as directed, which is twice a day. I find my advice to people that take decongestants is just use them at night time. During the day, you can get away with it. It's just when you're sleeping with a blocked nose, it's just a nightmare. So just before you go to bed, use it once. That's it. Don't use it for the rest of the day. And then you can use it for maybe 4, maybe 5 days before, at least I can, before you start to get rebound. But then don't use it anymore because the rebound gets worse and worse. So he's absolutely right. Listen to Matt.
I was not prepared to cover this topic today, but I'm learning so much. Thank you. The only thing I ever do is just take and that. Have you ever heard of that?
Someone actually just gave that to me just now.
Yeah? For
the first time.
Yeah, no. You know what the pharmacists call it?
What do they call it?
Same thing that chefs call MSG. Effing magic.
Really?
Yeah. It's so effective. That's one area where we're not twinsies. I don't get sick very much because I think I take if I feel like I'm getting sick.
Wow.
And I drink an insane amount of water.
I'll tell you something else.
Yeah.
That's different between you and me. You don't know how the ABC works, that you're running an ad for a product. That's another difference. Do you notice how I didn't name any brands?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right.
That's okay. Well, look, actually, this leads nicely into the next bit, which is the swearing correspondence. Because you know what? We don't have to bleep swear words anymore, but we might be bleeping the product that Jared just promoted. I'll see what the supervisor has to say afterwards.
Apologies.
But it's all good, man. But yeah, the supervisor came back after I ambushed him with 5 seconds to go before the last PEP. The suggestion of us having a category warning, that's a good suggestion. We're going to do it. We're going to have a warning in the blurb. And we're going to let Dave free. Dave can be his irritable, grouchy, and verbally abusive self. It's going to be wonderful. So thank you. So all you folks who are worried about it, you can play on. And for the 3 people who wrote in and said, actually, I prefer the bleeps. Sorry. And there were some great suggestions and comments on what we could replace swear words with. I almost wish we had the bleeps now. If we do have to bleep out Jared's product, we'll use one of your suggestions for the bleeps, because there were some great suggestions. Well done, all. Probably a good thing Dave isn't here today, because I can only imagine the kind of stream of profanities that he would release at this moment after I said he could go wild. But we got mild mannered Jared. I think we'll be safe. Morons correspondence. Lord Silas commented, he had some terrible news for me. You might recall I played My favourite footage from the LA protests 2 PEPs back of these 2 car morons pouring fuel into a car engine and then seeing it alight while they were hovering around the bonnet, trying to set it on fire, and they nearly set themselves on fire. Sadly for me, here's some devastating news. It wasn't from the LA protests. It was garbage. It was real, but it was a year old. I fell for a year-old clip. Lord Silas set me straight.
Thank you.
That's good news for the IQs of Los Angelinos, though. Well done all. Sorry, Californians, for slurring you unfairly with my internet illiteracy, that I fell for an old clip.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, especially in these riots, there's so many old clips floating around. But yeah, anyway, there you go. There's a correction. Gambling correspondence for this. Steve is from Steve. I asked people for some data on Australia versus America on sports betting per capita, and Steve delivered. I've done some number crunching. These numbers, you're never quite sure because different pages have different numbers, but we've done our best here. This is what I think is the case. America seems to be, in 2024, about $13.7 billion for total sports betting. Sports betting, that is. Not betting in total, but sports betting, which is very new in America, so that's growing fast. Works out to about $40 American per person, right, per year. Australia is sitting on, in 2024, depending on which figures you take, between $5.8 and $6.8 billion in 2024. Convert that to American dollars. Well, we're going to do this properly. It's $3.8 billion to $4.4 billion per person. That works out to $140 to $162 per person. So we spend about 4 times more per capita on sports betting than America does. So that's not bad. Look, he's got a reference here to the Andrew Denton song that we had. What was the name of the Andrew Denton song?
Oh, mate, we did quite well for a country our size.
Yes.
I have to say, like, American sports it's almost like Social Security, where, like, if people feel like it's being tainted, like, there are congressional hearings. Like, there were congressional hearings about steroids in baseball in the 90s when there was a home run race between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, because there was so much concern about sort of the integrity of sports. So the fact that that betting is now allowed, that the NBA in particular has watered down who they allow there to be their sponsors is quite an interesting development, and just culturally for the U.S., because in many ways sports is like the one thing that still unites us. Like, besides the Super Bowl, I don't know anything that everyone watches in America anymore.
Well, this isn't yet another example of something which I often say to Americans, that Australia is like a time machine with America, where we're either 20 years forward or 20 years behind you. And this is one where we're 20 years ahead of you. Like, we are the future for America when every single ad is sports betting and no one gives a toss anymore. Yep. And so, behold your future. Look, you know what? I've got an update here on US Steel. I'm going to put this to one side. We might come back to this. Or do you want me to get into it?
I'd love for you to get into it.
Okay, all right. Just for you, Jared.
Thank you.
We've talked in the past about Nippon Steel wanting to invest a stack of money in US Steel, which used to be this mega company, but now it's not even the biggest steel company in America. I think it's like 4th. And it's on its way down, which is why Nippon Steel wants to invest a lot of money into it. The government had to approve because Nippon Steel is Japanese, obviously, foreign investment, and Biden said no, possibly to try to win Pennsylvania in the election, possibly because the unions weren't mad on the deal. You can mind read to your heart's content. Trump originally also said no, but then he just changed his mind just now to allow the deal. Turns out there was a bit more to it than just, yeah, this sounds nice. He saw a bit of an opportunity here, admittedly on behalf of America, not on behalf of Trump Corp for once. And,
have you actually looked at the deal itself?
Oh, is there a Trump element? I didn't realize. Oh, here we go. This is something you can add to it.
Please, go ahead.
I'll tell you the American element. You tell me the Trump element. Okay. Yeah. The American element is, according to Howard Lutnick, the US government now holds a golden share in the new US Steel. What does that mean? It means it's a token share, but an important one, where it gives the government the power to outvote all other shareholders in certain circumstances. Now, we don't know exactly what those circumstances are, which I don't particularly like. If the government's going to blackmail a private company to essentially allow them to take over some aspects of their operation, I think the public should know what those aspects are. But Howard Lutnick did give us at least some clues in a tweet. He said, this perpetual golden share prevents any of the following from occurring without the consent of the President of the United States or his designee. Relocate US Steel's headquarters from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Redomicile outside the United States. Change the name of the company from US Steel. Reduce, waive, or delay the $14 billion of near-term investments into US Steel. That's from Nippon. Transfer production or jobs outside the United States. Close or idle plants before certain timeframes other than the normal course, temporarily idling for safety upgrades, etc. And other protections regarding employee salaries, anti-dumping pricing, raw materials and sourcing outside the US, acquisitions and more. I notice he didn't mention unions. We also know the president gets to name one of the company's 3 independent directors and gets veto power over the other 2. So that's all we know about it. There may be more, that may be it. We don't know. That's all that's been shared with us so far. The whole thing is not totally unprecedented, I must say. The idea of the government getting a piece of a company. The government did take a piece of General Motors after they bailed them out during the GFC. They bailed them out with $49 billion. They basically took that money in shares, which was a 60% share of the company at the time. Conservatives were furious because of socialism. The government didn't keep the shares, though. They sold them gradually between 2010 and 2013 to get their money back. In the end, they lost about $11 billion overall. And they didn't try to influence the company with their ownership like they are here. The strange thing is the government didn't even put any money into this venture. They just simply blackmailed their way into the position by allowing Nippon Steel to invest in the company. And apparently they now have this power for good. That's all I have to add about this.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating dynamic of foreign policy hitting domestic politics. So basically, the challenge is that U.S. Steel was going under, but they were going under at a terrible time. What was that time? A U.S. election.
Yes.
If this had happened in 2023, early 2023, or in 2025 now, I don't think we'd be here.
Yeah.
I think it was a unique issue because if you look at the substance of the argument, let's not forget that Japan is a U.S. ally, yes. And that U.S. Steel wanted to be bought, and everyone was in favor of it.
And I should say, Biden. Well, I just tried to read his mind before. What he cited was national security, which made no sense given Japan's an ally.
Exactly right. And the whole thing is just protectionist domestic politics. But I would encourage folks to look at the SEC filings. So you have the 5th amended and restated Certificate of Incorporation of United States Steel Corporation. Now, if you go down, and maybe I can share this with Lockie and he can show this. This will be in Article 6 of this. If you go to all the way down into this, you'll see, and if you want to skip reading the preamble, all that, you can just do a Control F for Trump. What do you get? You get, the corporation shall not either directly or indirectly by amendment, merger, consolidation, or otherwise without in addition to any other vote required by law or the certificate of incorporation at any time when Donald J. Trump is serving as President of the United States of America, the written consent of Donald J. Trump or President Trump's designee, or Part 2, at any time, the written consent of the CMAs as parties to the NSA, blah, 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 blah. And then just the fact that Donald Trump is then mentioned again, I should mention not just in that section, but also he's defined in later in Section 6, Part F, talking about President Trump's designee. All of this is completely unnecessary. You do not need to name the U.S. president. There is some sort of convention in the U.S. about giving powers to the office of the president. Yeah. But the fact that they are naming Donald Trump is just not something that we're used to seeing in the United States.
Yes, the president does have a title. It's president.
That's right. And the person that follows the president will also be president. But yeah, this one, the fact that they call it Donald Trump is obviously, I think legally it will stay with the office of the president, but the fact that they're naming Donald Trump in SEC filings is just not something I'm used to seeing. No. I'll say that much.
No, yes, another first. As an American, do you have a view on the creeping socialism of this? Do you think that, do you think this was a good thing for the government to do? I mean, there will be a lot of people who'll be listening to this who'll go, yeah, all those things that Howard Lutnick said the government should stop them doing, that's good. Stop them doing it.
Yeah, I think we sort of have touched on this before, how industry policy in the U.S. is sort of bipartisan, and how there is a lot of sort of the U.S. is famously for centuries. Alexander de Tocqueville, a Frenchman, wrote about this, centuries ago, about that sort of libertarian or individualistic mentality in the U.S. But that whole idea is really coming under a lot of threat recently. And let's not forget, that idea is in many ways responsible, in my view, for America's unique approach to guns, unique approach to healthcare, and so many other weird American things. But that idea is under pressure because systemically people think it is so unfair right now that the government needs to step in. And that's why you're seeing this increasing instances of the horseshoe theory of politics, where you have the most progressive Dems and the most conservative MAGA Republicans agreeing on issues like this.
Why don't we get into the big news of the week, which is Iran, like it's been for the last few weeks. Look, right off the bat, I want to ask you a question about polling, Jared, before we even get into the details of what happened in the last 2 days. So, because part of your job is performing polling research.
That's right.
So do you find it strange that the airstrikes from Trump never had any rally round the flag effect at all, seemingly, outside Republicans? Usually there's at least a short-term rally around the flag effect when there's military intervention, especially when the military intervention is as obviously successful as this was. Not a single person died. Not just Americans, but seemingly not even Iranians. It's at least not that we know of. The mission appeared to be flawless. They did exactly what they set out to do. Now, maybe they haven't wiped out the nuclear program. We're going to be talking about that. But at least at the time, it seemed like they'd made a pretty good fist of it. Republicans loved it, sure. They approved of the airstrikes at a rate of about 80% in most polls that I saw afterwards. Sure, the Dems weren't going to love it, of course. It's a partisan country. But the independents didn't love it either. If we take the CNN poll, for instance, 44% approval. This is of the airstrike. 56% disapproval. Republicans, 82% approval. Democrats, 88% disapproval. Independents, 60% disapproval.
This is after the airstrike.
Is after the airstrike.
Because before the airstrike, there was not majority approval either.
No. This is after the airstrike. Even this poll actually was like 2 days ago. So it was several days after the airstrike. Even amongst that 82% of Republicans, only 44% of Republicans strongly approved, which I was also surprised by. I expected more strong approval from Republicans. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you find that strange?
No, I do not find that strange because Americans view success and a rally around the flag differently. I think everyone does, has different approaches to that rally around the flag. But the number one thing that I see as causing people to rally around the flag is not taking an opportunity to eliminate a potential threat. It is an actual threat. 9/11, there was a rally around the flag effect because it was a threat against America. And Americans felt threatened like they had never been threatened in generations. And that caused the rally around the flag effect. The U.S. doing a bombing of Iran when Iran is really not, like, there's been no sort of rhetorical road work providing the political rhetoric providing any idea of why Iran is a threat. This is instead being classified as Trump deliberately on his part because of domestic political considerations. Trump saying, we did this targeted action, and we're done. This was not something that was threatening to America. This is something that was limited, targeted, and not by any means a total victory. And we'll talk about this later, but I think that it also explains some of the differences between the U.S. and Israel in particular, and how the U.S. always prides itself on its victories and views victories as like up or down, whereas I think a country like Israel is basically mitigating losses, and they focus actually on the losses. If you talk to Israelis about what they think about the most influential periods or incidents in their lives, it would be or in their histories would be the Holocaust, the Yom Kippur War, a surprise war, October 2023. That is the sort of the main things that Americans focus on. Americans may focus
Israelis.
Israelis.
Yeah.
Americans may focus on Pearl Harbor, but more than anything else, if you think of the image of World War II, it is that sailor kissing that nurse in the street, right?
Yeah.
It is American victory that we focus on.
Flag in Okinawa, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that the Americans not seeing a major threat, not seeing this as something that was really consequential to the United States, and the sort of really divided media ecosystem now causes there to, in my view, see little to no advantage for Trump.
That's a good explanation. Some interesting other elements, by the way, from the same poll, which also would add to what you're saying. 58% said that the strikes will make Iran more of a threat to the US, with 27% believing it will lessen the threat, and the rest expect it to do neither. Even amongst those who actually support the strikes, 55% expect them to lessen the threat level. So 45% don't. That's the people who support it. The most interesting bit for me, 55% express little to no trust in Trump to make the right decisions about the US use of force in Iran, with 45% saying they trust him moderately or a great deal. So America might simply just not trust Trump for decisions that's serious.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And again, to focus on the things that are bipartisan, Americans are, as we said, the polling before the strike showed most Americans against getting involved and against the strike on Iran. But I think what people don't appreciate is, more than anything else, what turns the tide on American presence overseas is American death, and which usually is from boots on the ground, which is why Bill Clinton famously did not really have boots on the ground in the former Yugoslavia. He used planes and bombs, right? And diplomacy. It is an acute sensitivity for Americans, and I think that's why this was not as consequential of an issue as it was for those of us who consume a lot of news. Yeah.
It's and actually, I will say this is going to drive some commenters crazy. I'm going to get some feedback on this one, but I do find it interesting though the lack of trust for Trump in this area. In that, I think that to be fair to the guy, the one area he does seem to be approaching responsible is when it comes to military action. That's the one area he does seem to be concerned about. Like, he doesn't seem to be concerned at all about anything else. Like, in terms of like worried about consequences. Like he's so impetuous, he'll just lose his temper. He'll care about some Trump org bounty over whatever. Like, he won't care. But when it comes to military action and potential troop deployment, he does seem to take that seriously.
I think what you're getting to is the fact that on a domestic level, he only has one direction on the escalation channel, whereas on foreign policy, he has shown restraint time and time again, and a very keen eagerness to de-escalate tensions. And that's just not something you see him do.
No, it's not. It's not. So anyway, it's just ironic that people don't trust him in that respect either. Anyway, I saw a really interesting trend in YouGov polling, actually, which I'm going to ask you about as well. There is a huge generation gap in the results. Question, do you think in the long run, US bombing of Iran will make the US safer or less safe? Only 13% of 18 to 29s said safer, to 54% saying less safe. For 65 pluses, it's 37-37. And the middle ages in between, they follow the trend. As they get older, they think it's going to make them safer. And then there's a second question from YouGov, same thing. How about this one? Do you approve or disapprove of the US bombing nuclear sites in Iran? 18 to 29s are 25% approval, 59% disapproval. 30 to 44s are 32 to 52. 46 to 64s are 44 to 40, and 65 pluses are 51 to 41. That's 51% approval to 41% disapproval. Do you have any theories about that?
Have you looked at the age breakdowns of polling in America before the Iraq War?
I have not.
I think it would look similar. time and time again, the older generations are more hawkish than the younger ones, and there was a lot of as someone who was in high school when the Iraq War launched, it was a rallying cry for younger Americans in particular, and you can even see it now. We do polling at the U.S. Study Center long term, and we can see actually a bump in. Anyways, my generation, people who came of age when the Iraq War was coming up, in terms of their perception of the U.S. alliance. Usually, like people, as they age, they generally get more conservative, but there's like a Vietnam War bump or valley, and similar with the Iraq War, where that was so really seismic in their lives that it engendered or facilitated a skepticism of the U.S. alliance that has lingered.
Well, leaving aside the mini valleys, why do you think there's a broader trend of older people being more hawkish? Because they're not going to get drafted? Is it the...
It's always the time. It's always the way things work. Almost always. I've looked at polling in a lot of different countries, and usually it is the older generations who are more hawkish. There are a few exceptions to this that I've seen personally. One is polling of Israelis and Palestinians.
Yep.
It's actually the younger generations who are more hawkish and more against a two-state solution. And sometimes in China, I see that as well. I see younger generations of Chinese citizens being more xenophobic in some ways. But in China, it depends on how you ask the question as well, because they might be open to foreign brands, but they don't like foreign countries. Whereas there's that whole Tiananmen Square generation that really thought in China that was open to democracy. Not a whole generation, but a number of democracy was more palatable back then, and they are a bit less hawkish in some ways than younger generations. But on the whole, yeah, older people are always more eager for, in my view, interventionist foreign policy in the developed world, at least.
It's really interesting. I was kind of navigating towards the draft thing because I was just thinking that, especially young men, were sort of Trump curious in the last election, and he talked a lot about drafts in the last election, like with Ukraine. Like that was certainly. I mean, let's put it this way: Steve Miller. I think I'll bring a tweet up. On the day of the election, Steve Miller tweeted out, if young men don't want to be drafted to fight in Kamala's and Cheney's Third World War, they better get out and vote for Trump.
I'm old enough to remember the people talking about drafts when I was in high school about the Iraq War. And unfortunately, the U.S. military, more often than not, is filled with people who wanted to just get a more affordable college education, which is just a sad reality. That really has allowed the U.S. military to not need to do a draft. With that said, you still do need to, as an American, register for the selected service. I'm still registered in the U.S., and I registered as soon, I think, as I turned 18. But it's not anywhere near palatable. No one in Congress is really making this a thing. This is something that has been a scare tactic for folks for a long time. Right. I think it's overplayed is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's get into what actually happened. First of all, obviously, ceasefire. That was fun. Announced by Trump on Truth Social in a unusually florid way, I thought. Congratulations to everyone! It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. I gotta say, I don't know what any of that means. One side has a ceasefire for 12 hours, then the other side has a ceasefire for 12 hours, and while the other side has a ceasefire, the first side remains peaceful and respectful.
Yeah, This is not a details-oriented guy. This is,
they're swapping halfway through.
He was so eager to get this over the line that you could tell how eager he is by the details that he puts in this. They're completely unnecessary.
Yes.
Why put this? Why not say we're on the cusp of a ceasefire?
Yeah.
He's, I think, trying to pressure them to obey it. But the whole thing, and as someone who has to respond to media and saying, "Oh, is this ceasefire really happening?" I don't know. I'm not there, because ultimately he's just tweeting things or posting things, and it's hard. Really, what I've said time and time again is proof's in the pudding. Are there still lots of missiles being shot at each other? No? Okay, then I think we probably have one.
He definitely was of the view at that point in time it was happening, because he finished off with a big ending. God bless Israel, God bless Iran, God bless the Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world! Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. That's such an upgrade on thank you for your attention to this matter, to just say his name and title as the end, like a signature.
But when it's submitted for his Nobel Peace Prize, that's going to look great.
Oh, it's gonna pop, baby. If you thought that one was a bit over the top, wait for the next tweet. Did you see the next tweet? Israel and Iran came to me almost simultaneously and said, "Peace!" I knew the time was now. The world and the Middle East are the real winners. Both nations will see tremendous love, peace, and prosperity in their futures. They have so much to gain and yet so much to lose if they stray from the road of righteousness and truth. The future for Israel and Iran is unlimited and filled with great promise. God bless you both. Oh my God, he's pinging.
So just to clarify,
Yes.
makes me want to take a nap. Just to clarify what's going on here. Why would Iran and Israel come to him if they did come to him, presumably?
Well, I know they didn't, because the Times of Israel reported that America got Israel to agree to the ceasefire first, and then they asked Qatar to convince Iran. But anyway, go on.
But you can do, like, Trump is also the master of the back channel, and that's a whole other story unto itself, how he did back channeling to Hamas and everything else, which is wild. Because any Democrat who had a back channel to Hamas would be impeached. Anyway, I think one thing that a lot of folks, they see Middle Eastern warfare, and they see hostilities, and they think, oh, this is going to escalate. We have to look at the cold, hard reality on the ground. In the same way that I said, are there still missiles being fired? That tells me where we're at. But also, how many more missiles do they have to fire against each other?
Yes.
Are you getting to that?
No, you keep going. I was going to mention that, but you keep going.
So as much as we talk about Israel targeting the nuclear capabilities of Iran, they also targeted their air defenses and their ballistic missiles. They also targeted their whole chain of command.
Yes.
And so they really prepared themselves to completely eliminate any counter response. And so Iran simply didn't have the capability to shoot that many more missiles at Israel. And Israel only has so many Patriot missiles that it can use to defend itself. The weaponry used in Israel to repel Iran's attacks were not small. We shouldn't forget that only one rocket targeted the homes of like hundreds of people that got through Israel's air defenses. And so they were not inconsequential when the Iranian strikes were successful in hitting Israel. And so I think they were basically in many ways out of ammo in many ways and that could have caused them to be more receptive to peace than before.
It wasn't just that they were out of ammo, as America was out of ammo as well. Like America was trying to compensate, because Israel pretty quickly started running out of I think they call them arrow interceptors.
Can I just add? 10 to 15% of the U.S. Army's inventory of THAAD missiles was likely used up in just a 12-day period.
There you go. Yeah. And then, America apparently was running low as well. They're both running low. And as far as the Iranian side goes, on the first day, Iran fired 200 missiles in 4 barrages. By day 5, they were firing 60 missiles in 8 barrages. So that tells you how many of the missile launchers that Israel were taking out. And so they just didn't have the same bandwidth. And obviously, they're easy to take down when there's only 3 or 4 of them coming at once. But at the same time, Israel was running out of arrow interceptors. So they both could do with a ceasefire at that point in time.
And just to talk about the relevance to Australia. Those THAAD missiles are the same THAAD systems that Korea has used. These are not inconsequential systems, and if you take from one region, then the other region gains and one region suffers. And so I think a lot of times we talk about the U.S. Pivot to Asia, since Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration launched that, and they're talking about the rebalance, the pivot to Asia, and then talking about moving more forces to Asia and more carrier groups, et cetera, et cetera. This is a very tangible example of taking capability from elsewhere in the world and putting it to the Middle East. The one region, more than any other region, more than Europe, where the U.S. does not want to invest more if they don't have to. But I think what we're seeing here is Trump has a higher threshold for trying to deter broader escalation in the short term in order to gain in the long term, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. Whereas the Biden administration, the Trump administration would posit, was too intolerant of any risks, and it actually increased challenges and threats in the long term.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, at least. I was going to add as well that the other thing about from the Israeli side is that you don't hear about this much in the Western press, but Iran were hitting some targets. Like they were, and it wasn't just random apartments. They were hitting oil refineries, they were hitting power stations, like they were hitting some targets. So they weren't obviously not as accurate and not as threatening as the Israeli missiles are, but they were doing a job. And as Israel was running out of interceptors, they were doing a better job as time was going on.
You're completely right. Yeah, you only have to look at the images, just do a Google images search of damage in Haifa and Tel Aviv in particular. It seems that the tax authority of Israel has predicted that claims will, from the damage from these missiles, will be double of the October 7 attacks.
There you go. Absolutely. And the other thing which people forget is that Israel is so much smaller than Iran, which means a couple of targets go a longer way when you're hitting Israel than when you're hitting Iran.
It also goes to maybe that thinking as well, where the Israeli thinking is more existential than the U.S., and therefore they have a higher risk threshold than the U.S. ever does in the region.
Of course. So that makes sense that they were going for a ceasefire, like you say. But then and Trump was, he's excited, like we just read before. He told NBC around the same time, "I think the ceasefire is unlimited. It's going to go forever." And he didn't believe that Israel and Iran, quote, will ever be shooting at each other again. But then it obviously almost fell apart. Whatever was meant to happen, this is what happened. And this took a bit of time for me to work out because the news wasn't terribly clear about what went on. But I did piece it together. Some people thought the ceasefire was meant to start, all these times are local times, at 3:30 a.m. Israel launched a round of strikes on Iran at about 3 a.m. local time. That was severe. Probably the most severe round of strikes of the war, including day one. They were targeting the Basij military members and Iranian security personnel. So they were targeting people here.
And just to, have you clarified in the past who those...
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so they were targeting a lot of times the domestic security folks, right? And Iran, clearly they lost control of their skies, which Putin had hoped Ukraine would do, but never did. And so Israel was able to do whatever they wanted over the Iranian skies. But what Iran has done effectively, I should say, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the government has done effectively since 1979, is not necessarily major warfare overseas, but more proxy things in the region, but also, better than anyone else in many ways, domestic control.
Yeah.
That's what Israel was targeting. And they were targeting not just those security forces. They were even targeting famous, notorious prisons in Iran of political dissidents. They were really going for the opportunity for a regime change of some sort, but obviously without any Israelis in the country.
Yeah. And at this point in time, Iran still hadn't even publicly accepted the ceasefire. The Iranian foreign minister, Araghchi, however you say it, he denied that there was a ceasefire agreement, but he said Iran would consider the matter closed if Israel stopped shooting at 4 a.m. And Israel did stop shooting then. Then at 5:40 a.m., Iran responded with another attack that hit a civilian centre in Beersheba. 2 missiles, one was intercepted, one hit the 6th floor of an apartment complex, killed 4 people, injured a little over 20. Iranian television then announced the ceasefire would actually take effect at 7:30 a.m. And then Iran launched 2 more missiles at 10 a.m. They were both intercepted, but Israel said nah. And then they sent their Air Force jets towards Iran. That's when Trump tweeted out, in all caps, "Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it's a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States." I love the signing in all caps. And that's when he came out to reporters, and that's when he held that press conference that we all know about, which you might not have seen the entire press conference. But it's short enough that we can play it to you in its entirety. This is the magical press conference, which we're not going to have to bleep.
I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too. Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have 2 countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
I think given the context, you can see why he was pissed off, but you could see that Nobel Prize slipping away. That's what you could see.
Passion. And there was a whole discussion, speaking of swear words, there was a whole discussion about whether it's appropriate for the president to be swearing like that. And I got asked, has the president ever sworn like that? It's like, yeah, but I don't know how often they do it in front of the media like that. That's the only difference, right? Let's not forget what Joe Biden said to Barack Obama when he signed the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, the BFD.
The BFD. Exactly, right?
Yes.
This is not something, it's just the fact that he was clearly angry. But also, can I just say, this always happens ahead of ceasefires. We've seen it happen in Ukraine and Russia a million times.
Absolutely,
they announce a ceasefire, so what they do is try to beat each other up as quickly as possible in the last few hours or maybe early hours of the ceasefire, and then stop and say we're done, right? This is just like siblings do this to each other.
This is it's pretty standard stuff. But then after that, he called up Netanyahu, demanded he completely cancel the attack. Quote, Netanyahu said a strike is necessary, but he agreed to limit their response, and Israel only struck 1 military radar site outside the city, and then that was done. Trump responded in classic style, which is he actually had a double ending. I appreciate this. I think the Peppers will appreciate this. Israel is not going to attack Iran. All planes will turn around and head home while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran. Nobody will be hurt. The ceasefire is in effect. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. It's got the double ending. I'm glad he could finally work in a drink. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And then it took less than a day for him to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by some congressman, Buddy Carter. So that's the whole process. Where are we at now, Jared?
Where we're at now is so I think what people have to realize with the Middle East is that the status quo is a bit different than the status quo elsewhere. So Iran may be out of conventional military means for retaliating. So we had that strike on the U.S. base in Qatar, and which they telegraphed to the U.S. that they were going to do.
Sorry, do you mean the annunciation of victory? That's what Iran called it.
Yeah. I find it fascinating in the way that Trump calls himself the deal maker, and then he still called that retaliation by Iran weak.
Yes.
We're just like, if you're trying to quell tensions, why would you say your punch against me was weak? You can just say, I respect you, let's move on. But no, that's not how diplomacy is done. And speaking of weird diplomacy, I just have to make this one aside. On the way that he told people in Tehran to flee, we're so used to him tweeting different things, and we're just saying, oh, that's just Trump being Trump. But when we have a war like this, and you're seeing you need to flee Iran, there were all sorts of video of traffic jams as far as the eye could see in Tehran of people fleeing because that's the president of the United States. And they had every reason to believe it, right? Like, did the U.S. engage in a major bombing of Tehran? No. But still, it just... We're in this era where it's really hard to tell, talking about fake news, what is an actual threat and what is actual tangible. So anyway, back to where we are now. It seems that we have, like we said, the end of conventional warfare as we're used to it. But this is not where Iran excels. Iran excels with its proxies and with asymmetrical warfare. So by its proxies, that used to be its ties to the former Assad regime in Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and Houthi rebels in Yemen. And a lot of folks talk about wondering, and you highlighted the lack in Rubio's response to the lack of intelligence for this attack. I can only assume, I'm not a government official, I haven't seen any intelligence, but I can only assume that it wasn't necessarily intelligence of this being an imminent threat as much as the intelligence that the counter-response from Iran was not as dangerous because of all the proxies that have been taken out. Moving forward, what does this mean? Yes, the proxies have been decimated for the most part, but asymmetrical warfare beyond proxies, you have to look at the target assassination attempts, and that includes Trump himself, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo. The Iranians have had a number of assassination attempts against U.S. officials. They've also supported bombings around the world, and so that's one thing that I think very well may be in the cards. And to be honest, that is a bit of the status quo. The other is cyber. We saw some cyber attacks by Iran, pretty minor ones, but still, I imagine that is where we are. And what we can sort of, I know, we have to say the time that we're recording this because things can change so quickly. But in terms of the status quo, that is what I think is the status quo in the Middle East moving forward. And the other thing I'll say on just the way that Israel views this is they call it mowing the lawn. Yeah. Because they do not think, similar to my point before about the U.S. Highlighting victory and Israelis highlighting defeat in their sort of mindset. The Israelis think this is just mitigating worse things. This is not a complete victory. This is a complete victory in the short term. So I think what we're likely to see is more asymmetrical warfare. We might see more mowing of the lawn in years to come, but not maybe in weeks to come. That is where I think is the most important takeaways from the state of things right now.
On the asymmetric warfare thing, there's certainly been some talk of potential sleeper cells. I saw an interesting little clip from NBC.
Just in, that Iran directly threatened America? Tom, tonight NBC News has learned that message from Iran was conveyed to President Trump by an intermediary during last week's G7 summit, warning the president if he launched airstrikes against Iran's nuclear facilities, Iran could respond by unleashing terrorist attacks on the U.S. by activating sleeper cells it has inside this country, according to U.S. officials.
It does seem like fodder for ICE to go nuts with, more than anything else, sadly. Tom Homan, he loves talking about this.
How many Iranians are in the country that are in sleeper cells trying to do bad to America right now?
Well, look, you and I talked about this many times. I said the last 4 years, my biggest concern was this open border was the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. So I pulled numbers this morning just from the CBP under Joe Biden. There was 1,272 nationals of Iran released in the country between OFO and the Border Patrol. But my biggest concern from day one, beyond the fentanyl, beyond the sex trafficking women and children, were the 2 million known gotaways. Over 2 million people crossed that border. We don't know who they are, where they came from, because they got away, because Border Patrol is so overwhelmed with the humanitarian crisis that Biden created that over 2 million people crossed the border and got away.
Bottom line, they're counting literally every Iranian who crossed the border under Biden.
And you only need to look at any sort of intelligence operation to see, actually, it's not necessarily the foreign nationals you have to worry about as much as you have to worry about the down on their luck local nationals, right? Look at how Ukraine launched those drones in Russia. a lot of times they were using Russian expertise, Russian drivers who maybe didn't know what they were doing, right? And so the whole idea that like this, it's so simplistic and short-sighted to only look at just the foreign nationals as a threat instead of just seeing threats in general, and regardless of what your passport is. It's the same thing happens with foreign investment. They're like, oh, if this foreign investment is from this country, then it's safe. But it's from that country, absolutely not. It's like, hold on, but if you just pay this guy a little bit of money, he'll give you the same thing as the other guy. Like, what? How can we just think as passports is what dictates the level of safety? It's a bit frustrating.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it'll be particularly frustrating if you happen to be an Iranian in America for the next little while, I suspect. I don't think it's going to be fun.
I'll just quickly say, as someone who knows a lot of Iranians, and my kids are half Iranian, that they've already cracked down on Iranians, even before Trump. If you were born in Iran or lived in Iran or served in any government institution, even a government-run hospital, you often are not allowed to go into the United States. And so you can be an Australian citizen. You can renounce your Iranian citizenship. But if you, like I said, work for a government-run hospital in Iran, then you are seen as a potential government agent, and you're not allowed into the United States.
There you go. I mean, just this weekend, they arrested 11 Iranians, seemingly because they, inverted commas, admitted connections to Hezbollah, whatever that means.
Can I just quickly say the reverse as well, in terms of how much Mossad has, the Israeli intelligence services have in Iran. One thing that I've always said is that Israel has never been short of targets in Iran because it is this dictatorial regime. These dictatorial regimes are so weak because they don't allow any dissent. There's so many opportunities for unbelievable intelligence breaches. And so the very intelligence a group that was supposed to mitigate Israeli intelligence was actually filled with Israeli intelligence officers, right? Yeah. Or I should say, or Iranians paid off by the Israelis. And so Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, has been out front and taking a victory lap after what's happened. And I came across this article recently where the head of Mossad went public in a rare message. And he said, moving forward in Iran, he said the Israelis or Mossad, we will be there like we have been there. And he praised the Mossad's operatives, revealing that hundreds of Mossad agents were embedded in Iran during the height of the operations. And it's unbelievable how much the Iranian government, if you learn anything about Iran, and you consume any Iranian culture, whether it be in movies or in books, I can recommend a few. Australia's own Kylie Moore Gilbert has a great memoir on her time in prison in Iran. There's also Persepolis, which is a book made into a movie. The one thing that always surprises people is just how incompetent so much of the Iranian government is, because similar to other entities we may know, the way to rise up in the government in Iran is not through competence, not through intellect, but through loyalty.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, you have some incompetence.
I wonder if that's the answer to my question, because I keep on, I mentioned this in the last PEP as well. It's actually a point of fascination for me, just how ham-fisted their propaganda is. And you go, like, your people cannot be this dumb. Like that you are treating them with, like, for instance, the Qatar attack, right? Like you said that they warned Qatar. They didn't just warn Qatar, they warned everyone. Fox News knew about this attack before the attack happened. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they rang up Fox. Everyone knew about this attack. Qatar shot down 9 of the 10 missiles because I was just sitting there waiting, and the other one just landed in nowhere. And then this is what the Iran said. They said, our forces destroyed the US airbase in Udeid, Qatar, in response to America's attack against our nuclear facilities. And you just go, how dumb do you think your people are that you're putting out that kind of propaganda? They surely don't believe this. And so I thought to myself, maybe there's some kind of psychological component here where they're almost being hard to believe as a means of flaunting their power over them or something. But do you think it might just be incompetence?
Yes. Again, just consume Iranian media, free Iranian media, I should say, that doesn't have to be censored. And you can see that it's not exactly the best and the brightest running the government. And a lot of times they'll literally be like, I think it was Persepolis, where they talk about how, I think it was a garbage truck driver who becomes like the judge deciding civil disputes. And they're just like, who the hell is this idiot? Are you kidding me? And it just... Yeah, they have to say face. They have to say what they think is in their interest to maintaining control of the country. And it's another thing that I'll also say. I know you talked a lot about Iraq and the echoes to Iraq, which I can definitely see. The one thing I would say is that Iran is fiercely proud of how it is not an Arab country. And it really does not see itself as belonging to the Middle East in the same way that Iraq has that part of that pan-Arab nationalism. Do you know what Iran actually has similarities to? Aryan. They are still angry that the Arabs conquered them a while ago and made them darker. There is a lot of Iranian pride about them not being Arab and not being one of those crazy Sunni types, but actually proudly different with a long history of their own, coming from Cyrus on down. And they see themselves as more educated, more cultured, and they see themselves as distinct from the rest of the Middle East. That I don't think enough people appreciate that.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. There you go. Okay, well, while you're running hot here, let me ask you a question. Obviously, ceasefires are wonderful, and we may well be in that area. You say like this post-war kind of cyber kind of area. But even before this war, everyone was saying, if you attack Iran and you ruin diplomacy, you better get their whole nuclear program off the table, because obviously you only incentivize Iran to try and get a nuke if you don't pull it off. So have they done enough?
Yeah, and that's what all the debate is right now. So you have the U.S. intelligence agencies once again leaking against the Trump administration's wishes, saying you've maybe set them back months. Yeah. The Israelis, on the other hand, are saying years, if not decades. There's no question that they were set back. But yeah, how much have they set them back? And I don't think anyone knows with 100% confidence how much they've set them back. I think it's what we may know in the weeks and months to come. But I think it's also, we shouldn't forget, ultimately, what is the U.S. and Israel trying to do? The term they use is deterrence. They're trying to deter Iran from having a nuclear bomb. They are using both diplomacy, economic incentives, and now military action to stop them from doing so. So the question is, what moving forward would deter Iran from having the bomb? And I think that's, or pursuing the bomb. And I think there's a lot of questions about what would actually be in their interest, because there's a school of thought in the U.S. that, you heard about. Ken Waltz famously has this idea, a famous American academic, foreign policy academic or international relations academic who talked about basically mutually assured destruction was a stabilizing force in the Cold War, and that actually Iran, and some people would say Iran getting the bomb would actually be stabilizing to the Middle East because there wouldn't be more invasions. I think that is a bit wrong, and I think you only have to look at the history of the Cold War and see that the more people get nukes, the way more dangerous everything gets, and we were so close to getting to nuclear holocaust so many times, and it just took one, usually just a guy, some mid-level like admiral or something in the Soviet Navy, who's like, actually, I don't think we should fire at this point, right? I personally don't think that makes sense, but there's a school of thought that says that mutually assured destruction that in many ways did provide some stability to the Cold War era is actually not something that provides stability to Iran, because they are so obsessed with their the basis of the Islamic Republic being sacrificing their life for the sake of the Islamic Republic, that mutually assured destruction is an incentive, not a deterrence.
Okay. I was going to do the back and forth of, this person says that person says that, but I actually think you summed it up really nicely before, just in a couple of sentences. So I'll just leave that. I mean, you got Hegseth going, they got it all, but then you've got the DIA, that's the the
Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, the Pentagon's intelligence agency, saying just a few months. Although that was an initial assessment, 1 day's worth of intelligence. They hadn't cooperated with it. They hadn't coordinated with any other agency at that point in time. It might change. But I did want to read a little bit of a Twitter thread from Jeffrey Lewis, who, unlike me, is an actual arms control expert, who made a point I just haven't heard many people make.
He is like, and I think his Twitter handle is Arms Control Wonk, I believe, right?
Yeah.
He is one of the best in the game in terms of knowing, and whether it be North Korea or Iran, he is one of the most respected in terms of looking at nuclear proliferation and from a military perspective and the dangers.
Absolutely.
So just to say that you're not finding some random guy on Twitter. He's legit.
No, he's legit, yeah. He had a 17-tweet thread, but I'm just focusing on a couple of them here. Yes, the strikes on the enrichment plants at COM, yep, Fordo, FEP, and Natanz, PFEP and FEP, appear successful. But there has been no effort to strike the enormous underground facility next to Natanz, where Iran can make more centrifuges and maybe do other things. In 2022, Iran moved a centrifuge production line to the heart of the mountain there. This facility is huge. We estimated 10,000 square meters or more. And we don't really know what else it might house, like enrichment or conversion. Also, Iran recently announced a new enrichment facility in a secure location and told the IAEA it was ready to start installing centrifuges. The IAEA was set to inspect the facility near Isfahan before the bombing. It hasn't been bombed, as far as I know. Let me say again, Iran said it had a new enrichment facility. The IAEA was about to go see it, but before that could happen, Israel struck other facilities in Iran, but not the new one. See the problem?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah. How far do we set it back? And also, do the Israelis and Americans feel confident that they perhaps have the human intelligence to not need to do that? Because obviously, there's so much of this is a technical question, right? Like, obviously, nuclear power is not simple stuff. But also, the question of how much damage, but also what is actually reckless to bomb and what is responsible to bomb, and how much can they just ruin with cyber attacks and human intelligence undermining and sabotage versus the hard explosions. And so, and it requires a level of of subject matter expertise on nuclear issues, foreign policy ideas about what Iran is trying to do. And it's really hard to hold all of these levels of sort of intelligence and awareness in one place.
But of course, is Iran going to allow inspectors in now?
Unlikely.
Yeah,
unlikely.
Well, they literally just their parliament literally just put through a motion just now that they're going to distance themselves from the IAEA. So,
and we shouldn't forget how much similar to other countries, the Iranian pursuit of nuclear power is so part of the Iranian identity. You can look at Iranian currency and see that the sort of nuclear image atom is there. It is part of the identity. It is a source of pride. So yes, I think in some ways you could see the you could see I can understand where the parliamentarians are coming from. With that all said, we shouldn't forget what happened at Iran's most recent elections. I don't mean to do a huge tangent, but there was a major boycott of the elections because of people being so disillusioned with the Iranian government. I still, to this day, have never seen the benefits of an election boycott. But so that's just a caveat to say that Iran's government is even more unrepresentative of the people than ever.
I don't know if they're going to get inspectors, if they're going to allow inspectors in. I mean, because the thing is, they've already got their ceasefire now. Trump's not going to want to, especially given that Trump's going around telling everyone that he's got the nuclear program dealt with. Like, it's in his interest to not backtrack on that. So he's going to have his meeting. Oh, well, America's going to have their meeting with Iran next week, apparently. I assume the first thing they're going to ask is, how about some inspectors? If Iran just says no, what, are they going to invade them again?
Did the U.S. invade Iran or bomb Iran?
Well, yeah, whatever.
There were no boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Are they going to bomb them again? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially after Trump has very clearly said, no, we got it.
I mean, Israel would have no qualms doing it again.
I'm sure they wouldn't mind going second round. I could easily see Iran getting away without having the inspectors there. And there'd just be uncertainty, which was the original concern, that the only way you can be absolutely sure that you have taken care of their nuclear program is if they do it willingly. That's the only way you can be absolutely sure. Until then, you need to go to extraordinary lengths to verify it, and inspectors are a good start. But inspectors can only report on what they see. If they don't show inspectors, a cavern that's somewhere, then inspectors will have no idea. So this is the problem when you go down the military route.
With that said, there was also issues in the past of even when they weren't allowing inspectors in, they weren't allowing inspectors everywhere.
That's what I'm saying.
When is it ever enough?
Yeah.
I've talked about this before, how the U.S. somehow in a number of countries around Asia is still fairly popular, despite the dumpster fire that is American politics. And the reason for that is, again, not because Americans are good-looking or charismatic or charming. It is because China. Right? That threat is what unites the region. I have to wonder what the Middle East looks like with a lesser Iranian threat. Because as much as the Trump administration wants to take the laudits of the Abraham Accords, the normalization of Israel's ties with a number of Arab countries, what pushed that, in my view, more than anything else, was their unifying against Iran.
Yes.
So without that threat, like coalescing them together, I have to wonder what it looks like. And also at the same time, we shouldn't forget what the region looks like. Also at the same time, we shouldn't forget what happened in the first Trump administration that caused Saudi Arabia to actually warm up to Iran. I'm not sure if folks remember this, but Saudi refineries were attacked by Iranian proxies. And do you know what the Trump administration did about it? And let's not forget, where did Trump go first on his first trip as a president?
To the land of the glowing ball.
Exactly.
Yes.
Do you know what Trump did about those attacks on the Saudi refineries?
I don't remember.
Nothing. He did nothing.
That's why I don't remember.
And it scared the daylights out of the Saudis, and it caused them to be like, okay, maybe we should start having some normalization with Iran to a certain extent, right? It's still a long ways to go. So that's on one hand that I'm thinking about, like what does this look like moving forward with a less powerful Iran that does not incentivize sort of coalition of the willing in the region that is supported by the U.S.
That's interesting. So you think there's a chance that the region could spin out a little bit?
There's a lot, trying to predict the Middle East is always a fool's errand. But I'm just saying that the structural dynamics that we took for granted for so long that Iran is going to piss everyone off enough to actually have a sort of balance of power issue in the region with Israel having closer ties with the Gulf and Saudi Arabia, that is that one of the largest drivers of that is not as present now.
I should say before we've kind of moved past it, but just to make sure we just tick it off, that we didn't really get into the uranium hunt aspect of it.
Yeah.
I should just note, I mean, obviously Iran says they moved all the uranium. Their deputy political head of state broadcast, the state broadcaster said that, and a few officials did. The Israeli officials told the New York Times that Iranians had moved the uranium before the bombing. Netanyahu said this.
You asked about the enriched uranium. Well, look, we're following that. We've been following it very closely. I can tell you that it's an important component of a nuclear program. It's not the sole component. It's not a sufficient component, but it is an important component. And we have interesting intel on that, which you'll excuse me if I don't share with you.
So it's pretty clear what he's implying. He thinks they moved it as well. So he thinks that he knows where it is, but he thinks that they moved it. J.D. Vance basically admitted that he thought it was moved, or at least that he had no idea where it was. This would be something they deal with, but he's also like kind of who cares?
The UN's Atomic Energy Watchdog said that Iran had 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium. Do we know what has become of that? Was it destroyed in this attack? Do we know?
We're going to work in the coming weeks Yeah, John, we're going to work in the coming weeks to ensure that we do something with that fuel, and that's one of the things that we're going to have conversations with the Iranians about. But what we know, John, is they no longer have the capacity to turn that stockpile of highly enriched uranium to weapons-grade uranium, and that was really the goal here. Uranium is not that difficult to come by, John, but enriching uranium up to the point of a nuclear weapon, that is what the president put a stop to last night.
Maybe. It's unless they have centrifuges somewhere else. And obviously the DIA assessment also said that they hid the uranium as well. And the administration has jumped all over that DIA assessment. Carolyn Levitt called the person who leaked it an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. That's her rebuttal. This alleged assessment is flat wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted the perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets. Total obliteration.
Can we just go into that insult? Low-level loser.
Yeah.
So is it that if they were high-level, then it would actually mean something? So she's saying...
Be a winner.
Yeah. Is it like a high-level winner? If a high-level winner released this, it would actually mean something.
That would mean it's
she's saying
accurate.
This intelligence is not accurate simply because they're a low-level loser.
Yeah.
But then she's so angry about it that she could have just said, this is so inaccurate because it's been released by a low-level loser that I'm not even going to comment on it. But instead, she gets so angry.
She does get very angry.
The tell is always there.
She gets angry to the point that you're not even sure if it's anger anymore because she's always at that level. Like maybe it's just the way that this species communicates. It is. I don't know why they do it, to be honest. So it just makes them seem unreliable to me rather than the low-level loser. Tulsi Gabbard had a go as well. I won't read that whole tweet. She's still trying to make up for the fact that Trump hates her. We'll talk about that maybe later, maybe not. We'll see how we go for time. But you can decide for yourself who you trust. But we got all that in the mix. But there is something which I think people haven't talked about. I just want to tick that off when I moved on to the next thing, which is, a few people have talked about the fact you can have the uranium but not have the bomb. That's what J.D. Vance was talking about. But what I don't think many people have talked about at all, which I think they should have, especially beforehand, is you can have the bomb and not be able to use the bomb. People are assuming that once they've got a bomb, that's a bomb that they can use. But it's not that easy because most experts seem to believe if Iran builds a bomb, it's going to be one of the early kinds of bombs, like the World War II style kinds of bombs, which they call gun-type bombs. They're the simplest types of bombs. They're huge. They're like 3 meters long, several tons heavy. You don't just walk around with one of those bombs. You don't put on a missile. All right, so how are they going to use this bomb? It is possible, obviously, to make the bombs much smaller and put them on missiles, but you need thermonuclear capabilities, which is a much more advanced technology. And there's no evidence that Iran has that technology. And if they do, it's going to take, if they're working towards it, it's going to take much longer. Like just to get to a bomb, the first step is the World War II style, and then you keep on going, right? How are they going to, if they put on a plane, if they modify a plane to put it on, that plane is going to be slow and low and easy to take out of the sky. Now, if they want to use it in Israel will absolutely get that plane. Yeah, that's presumably why Chris Murphy, what he's been saying over and over again is that intelligence suggests that Iran are nowhere near having a deliverable nuclear weapon, emphasizing the word deliverable. Whereas people like Gabbard simply talk about nuclear weapons. They don't talk about deliverable nuclear weapons. But I think deliverable is actually the most important bit. And I feel that distinction was ignored last week by Israel at the very least in their rush to take advantage of this opportunity. But it's still the case now. Even if Iran does rush for a nuclear weapon, it doesn't mean that nuclear weapon is going to be of any use to them.
Yeah, I'm not a nuclear scientist nor a nuclear military guy, so I can't say specifically. But I do know that Iran has, it borders 7 countries. And so it's not exactly like an island in the ocean that is cut off from the world. And it has a lot of different ethnic groups within it and a lot of ties and a lot of ties to around the world and ethnic ties all over the world. And so I feel like there are, looking at the deliverable component of this is a really good point, but I think that's a step too far for a country like Israel that views that as an existential threat.
Yeah, sure.
And so they don't even care. They really, because again, we talk about how small Israel is. You know, U.S. could lose maybe California, and depending on it just takes one mistake and Israel's off.
Yeah. Iran always referred to them as a one-bomb country. Yeah,
they are.
Yeah, yeah. And just one more thought in this little section as well. Spare a thought for Lindsey Graham. He hasn't given up. He hasn't given up on the dream. He got so close to the dream, he could taste it. He was willing to risk that. He was willing to risk it to get that, to attain that dream. But he hasn't given up on it yet. He's still hankering for regime change. This was yesterday in the Senate.
So what happens in the next few days is going to determine the course of history for the state of Israel and the region for decades to come. To our friends in Israel, finish the job. Do what you have to do to bring about the regime change that will allow your children to sleep through the night. To the American people, wake up. Understand what we're fighting. The Ayatollah is not normal. These are not normal people. Stand with Israel.
And on Twitter, he tweeted out, a ceasefire that leads to peace is wonderful. A ceasefire that allows Iran to regroup and rearm is a step backwards. I just want to ask you one thing, Lindsay, because I know you're a pepper. Going down the camera to you, Lindsay. I hope you're enjoying the show so far, Lindsay. If you love Israel as much as you seem to love Israel, why have you just lost their A? Why is it Israel? What's going on, Lindsay? If you truly love Israel, you'll love their A as well. Don't hate the A. It's a wonderful letter. Anyway, it's a spare thought for him.
Speaking of Lindsey Graham, can we quickly just talk about Tucker Carlson getting meaner and meaner?
Yeah,
and
of course we can.
We have that interview with Ted Cruz.
Yes, we do.
Where I don't think we've covered that in PEP.
No, we haven't.
Yet.
No, we haven't.
And
we can play some clips from it if you'd like.
Sure. I think my favorite is where basically Tucker Carlson is so mean to Ted Cruz that Ted Cruz says, you shouldn't be so, I think, spiteful or snarky. He said, you shouldn't be so snarky. And Tucker Carlson's like, yeah, that's fair.
So they're hitmen, but not the bad kind, the efficient kind?
No,
what are you saying?
They're a weak country who is on its knees, and I think we need to...
Then why are we so afraid of them? Why are they the biggest threat if they're a weak country that's on its knees?
Because they're trying...
I'm trying to keep track.
They're trying to develop... Be a little less snarky.
I know, you're right. That is a problem that I have.
Tucker Carlson has just really gone on a rampage, and he had a conversation with another conservative podcaster named Matt Walsh. So Tucker Carlson goes and asks Walsh on his show, what percentage of war-crazed Republican senators are secretly gay? What is that? I'm just like... What?
I thought he was going Matt Walsh. Okay, fine.
Yeah, no, he's not going at Matt Walsh. He's talking to Matt Walsh.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, why is this the hill you want to die on? So he also has a number of openly gay people on his show, including Glenn Greenwald.
Yes.
And yet he is basically criticizing Republicans who want to have a more interventionist policy towards Iran for being secretly gay. And it just really, the combination of that with the Ted Cruz thing, which, by the way, I still can't believe that Ted Cruz, his media team, allowed that interview to even happen in the first place, because they should have known that Tucker Carlson of 2025 is not the Tucker Carlson of 2016. Tucker Carlson is just getting so, petty. There's
definitely some would say not an undercurrent, just a current of serious homophobia developing on the right. Like some might say it's always been there, but I feel like in the last few years, I mean, we've got in the schedule to talk about this a little later on, and I feel like in the last few years it kind of went away and now it's back. Like Trump is calling, his nickname for Anderson Cooper is Allison Cooper.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, this might sound naive. What they say on the Discord, they refer to as sweet summer Chaz, sweet summer innocent Chaz. I can't believe he gets away with that. Like of all the nicknames, Alison Cooper, just flat out, you're gay, you're a woman.
Yeah.
Like he's
and then at the same time, people like Don Lemon, CNN's Don Lemon, has come out and just in the last few months said that when he goes to the Republican events, especially the Republican National Convention, it is overwhelming how aggressive the men are in hitting on him while there. It's almost like there's a self-hatred going on that's really like disturbing, like publicly saying one thing. And obviously we know all the criticisms of the leader of CPAC and the how I think it was Matt Schlapp, I believe his name is, and the accusations against him. And it just, the whole issues around homophobia in this MAGA movement I find really fascinating and also worrying.
The way we've just, this conversation's just taken a sharp turn. We almost should get into the Gallup stuff, but we do have other Iran stuff to do, so we should probably do a little bit. I know you wanted to talk about the impeachment vote.
I do. I can make it short.
Yeah, all right.
I think it's
This
probably...
is Pep, man. You have to make anything short.
We only have 3 hours, so I'm so self-conscious now. I'm not talking too long. I think we should consider getting a sting. I don't know if ABC allows this of a Al Green song of love and happiness.
Yeah.
Because time and time again, the Democrat Congressman Al Green in Congress really pisses off the Democrats. Because what did he do again this time? He called for an impeachment vote. And what did the Democrats think of it? They hated it. Because Democrats are obviously not happy with Trump. But the reason that Al Green, the member of Congress from Texas, the same one who famously during Trump's de facto State of the Union stood up and was escorted out.
Started screaming incoherently.
Yeah, and again, made the Democrats look more childish than they already do. He then did this impeachment vote, and he only got 79 House Democrats, the most progressive in the safest of districts, to go along with him, and 128 Democrats voted against it.
Did AOC vote for it or against it? Do you know?
She voted for it, I believe.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say, this is one where he wasn't one out. Like Al Green famously files impeachment motions on like day one of presidencies. In this case, he wasn't the only one. AOC said it was impeachable. Sean Casten said it was impeachable. So, like I said, there were more serious legislators than Al Green who were suggesting it was impeachable. So, why do you think it got tanked so badly?
I'll read you some of the anonymous quotes that Democrats said about this, which I just love. Quote, "A completely unserious and selfish move. Most people think it's unhelpful." And then another Democrat said there's a lot of anger about the vote. And I think you heard it from leadership today. They're frustrated. Hakeem Jeffries, House Minority Leader, voted against it. Nancy Pelosi, former Dem leader, voted against it. It really undermines the arguments for impeachment, which the Democrats, assuming they win the midterms, will want to start, I imagine, fairly soon after taking office. The Democrats do want to impeach him, but not over Iran. This is not the issue. Like, foreign policy is just not the issue that wins impeachment votes.
Yeah.
As much as the Ukraine issue was a foreign policy issue, it was the corruption, the quid pro quo. That is the issue at hand. It was domestic politics that was driving it. The Trump, bombing Iran is not the hill that the Democrats want to die on. And that's why they were so angry with Al Green. And I think Al Green, the musician, is underrated. And if ABC allows it, I'd love to hear it more in Pep Podcasts.
I'm sure we can have it underneath for a little bit. I don't think the problem's ABC. The problem's YouTube. So we should just have it underneath us, so that way,
fair.
That way we beat the copyright police. Also, another sort of loose thread here. We talked about Tucker Carlson. I'm actually interested a little bit on Marjorie Taylor Greene, because her evolution over the last couple of weeks, I think, has been really interesting and unpredictable from my perspective, at the very least. Because we start with Tucker Carlson, who a few weeks back had his huge screed about the war. Mark Levin was at the White House today lobbying for war with Iran. To be clear, Levin has no plans to fight in this or any other war. He's demanding American troops do it. We need to stop Iran from building nuclear weapons. He and like-minded ideologues in Washington are now arguing. They're just weeks away. If this sounds familiar, it's because the same people have been making the same claims since at least the 1990s. It's a lie. In fact, there's zero credible intelligence that suggests Iran is anywhere near building a bomb or has plans to. None. Anyone who claims otherwise is ignorant or dishonest. If the US government knew Iran was weeks from possessing a nuclear weapon, we'd be at war already. Iran knows this, which is why they aren't building one. A lot of people could have said that. That's something that we'd say on PEP. But Tucker was very wrong. Very wrong in that particular tweet, other parts of the tweet, because, and this part has been memory hold a little bit. He also said this. And then there's the question of the war itself. Iran may not have nukes, but it has a fearsome arsenal of ballistic missiles, many of which are aimed at US military installations in the Gulf, as well as at our allies now and at critical energy infrastructure. The first week of a war with Iran could easily kill thousands of Americans. It could also collapse our economy as surging oil prices trigger unmanageable inflation. Consider the effects of $30 gasoline. But the second week of the war could be even worse. Iran isn't Iraq or Libya or even North Korea. While it's often described as a rogue state, Iran has powerful allies. It's now a part of a global bloc called BRICS, which represents the majority of the world's landmass, population, economy, and military power. Iran has extensive military ties with Russia. It sells the overwhelming majority of its oil exports to China. Iran isn't alone. An attack on Iran could very easily become a world war. We'd lose. So that didn't quite pan out. Like, I'm not saying it's stupid, but it didn't pan out like Tucker Carlson predicted. By contrast, what happened was Russia offered their mediation services. This left J.D. Vance, by the way, in an awkward position, which hasn't gotten enough press, I feel, because J.D. Vance employs his son. And the Tucker Carlson's son, that is. And presumably that's nepotism and also a suck-up for 2028. But Tucker going so directly at Trump puts Vance in a very awkward position, which explains why Vance was so quiet for a very long time at the beginning there, when the MAGAs were getting a little restless. And not to mention, by the way, there were some awkward quotes out there that Vance probably wouldn't want surfaced at that point in time. Like, for instance, from November 2024, Vance on Israel, sometimes we're going to have overlapping interests and sometimes we're going to have distinct interests. Our interest very much is not in going to war with Iran. It would be a huge distraction of resources. It would be massively expensive to our country. And March 2025 from Politico, the Iraq war was caused by the emotional need to fuck something else up. And Afghanistan didn't satisfy that need. If I have a big fear for Israel right now, it's about the same exact dynamic. They're going to need to try to fuck something else up because the psychology impact of the Hamas attacks on October 7 was so powerful.
And then we can also add, though, if you want, the Donald Trump tweets about Barack Obama wanting to start a war with Iran.
There is that as well. But anyway, J.D. Vance is staying out of it, and Trump had to fend for himself. So then Trump... he didn't just laugh at Tucker's predictions. When reporters asked him about whether he was losing America first, he replied by saying, well, considering that I'm the one that developed America first and considering that the term wasn't used until I came along, I think I'm the one that decides that. For those people who say they want peace, you can't have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. So for all those wonderful people who don't want to do anything about Iran having a nuclear weapon, that's not peace. And that's when Marjorie Taylor Greene stepped in. She seemed to come dangerously close to having a go at Trump. She said, anyone slobbering for the US to become fully involved in the Israel-Iran war is not America first. Wishing for murder of innocent people is disgusting. We are sick and tired of foreign wars, all of them. And then she reposted a Tucker Carlson clip of him going, the war. Obviously, Trump wasn't pleased with the independence being shown by his usual fanboys at this point in time. So he took a little detour. He turned to a brownish shade of nose and he moved to the Rudolph, the reindeer of brown noses. That's a Mike Huckabee. And have you seen Mike Huckabee's text?
No. Just to clarify, he is the U.S. ambassador to Israel.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Good clarifying. That's a good point. He shared Mike Huckabee's text, which is becoming quite a fan of doing. He also shared Mark Ruddy's, or however you pronounce it, Rutty's text the other day. Mr. President, God spared you in Butler, Pennsylvania to be the most consequential president in a century, maybe ever. The decisions on your shoulders I would not want to be made by anybody else. Lockie, can you give me some backing music? You have many voices speaking to you, sir, but there is only one voice that matters, his voice. I am your appointed servant in this land and am available for you, but I do not try to get in your presence often because I trust your instincts. No president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours. Not since Truman in 1945. I don't reach out to persuade you, only to encourage you. I believe you'll hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice, and to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the last one to leave. I will not abandon this post. Our flag will not come down. You did not seek this moment. This moment sought you. It is my honor to serve you. Can you imagine the standard of sucking up in 3 years' time for Trump?
And we should not forget the familial ties with the Trump administration. His daughter being now the governor of Arkansas, but before that being one of the most effective press secretaries in the Trump administration.
Yeah,
not the first. There was a few before her, and she was to this day still a very competent MAGA spokesperson. She really knows how to do it well, and like father, like daughter.
Trump's going to need to employ human catfish. So. Anyway, that didn't do it for Trump. So basically, straight after he sent out that text, he then had a press conference and he just went Tucker directly.
In response to Tucker Carlson criticizing you, saying that you're complicit in the war.
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen.
Yeah. We shouldn't forget, remember what Tucker Carlson's texts have said about Donald Trump in the Dominion lawsuit.
They were quite negative.
My favorite discovery of all time, that I can ever think of any political matter, where I think the verb he used was despise him.
Yes, despise.
Despise Donald Trump.
Despise was a verb.
But it's fascinating, Tucker Carlson. One, we've all seen the viral clip of him being taken down by Jon Stewart when he was on Crossfire on CNN. But what he has evolved into, and how he has somehow straddled this line of talking to conventional media people all the time while also getting more and more pettier and pettier and just getting so mean-spirited in his criticisms. And then getting just increasingly, in my view, a bit unhinged in some of his conspiracy theories and the way that he is platforming a number of questionable folks. It really, I don't understand why he keeps moving in only one direction. But I have to wonder where he's going to be in 3 years' time.
Jeez, I don't want to think about that. Oh my God. It's probably going to be at the convention stage. Jesus. Anyway, that's one for another pep. And then Trump started tweeting out against Tucker as well. Someone please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran can have a nuclear weapon. America first means many great things, including the fact that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, make America great again. But then Marjorie Taylor Greene struck back again directly at Trump. Tucker Carlson is one of my favorite people. He fiercely loves his wife, children, popularity, and viewers. And our country. Wife, children, and our country. Since being fired by the neocon network Fox News, he has more popularity and viewers than ever before. He unapologetically believes the same things that I do, that if we don't fight for our own country and our own people, then we'll no longer have a country for our children and our grandchildren, and foreign wars, intervention, regime change put America last, kill innocent people, and make us broke, and will ultimately lead us to our destruction. That's not kooky. That's what millions of Americans vote for. It's what we believe is America first. Wow. Get me Huckabee. That's almost Thomas Massey-like. That's what that is.
I don't know if you're going to get to this, but the reconciliation between MTG and Trump, where she tweets, The press and some other nasty people would love to write lying headlines and create dirty rumors that there's a break between me and President Trump. Wrong, all caps. MTG, heart emoji, DJT, US flag emoji.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is fake news. And by what you're saying, I mean what she has said is now fake news. What?
I was going to get there, but it's good that you read that beautifully with class. I would note that she kept it up for a few days as well. It didn't just end at the missiles. Yeah. She said, every time America is on the verge of greatness, we get involved in another foreign war. There would not be bombs falling on the people of Israel if Netanyahu had not dropped bombs on the people of Iran first. Israel is a nuclear-armed nation. This is not our fight. Peace is the answer. And then she had this big, long one. I spent millions of my own money and traveled the entire country campaigning for President Trump and his MAGA agenda and his promises. Trump's MAGA agenda include these key promises: no more foreign wars, no more regime change, world peace. This is what people vote for. Only 6 months in and we're back into foreign wars, regime change and World War III. Feels like a complete bait and switch to please the neocons, warmongers, military-industrial complex contracts, and neocon TV personalities that MAGA hates and who are never Trumpers. After the bombs were dropped, we were told complete success and Iran's nuclear capabilities were totally wiped out. Then it quickly turned to Iran's nuclear facilities, partially damaged, and now we don't know where their enriched uranium is. Let me be very clear. My children are 22, 25, and 27. They will literally fight anyone for their future, and their future and their entire generation's future must be free of America last foreign wars that provoke terrorist attacks on our homeland, military drafts, and nuclear war. I am fighting for them to have a future where they can afford to buy a home, afford insurance, invest for retirement, enjoy life, retain their God-given freedoms, afford to raise a family under their Christian faith, not be in debt, safety, and security, and not have our own taxpayer-funded government destroy it all, contrary to brainwashed Democrat boomers think and protest about. Trump is not a king. MAGA is not a cult, and I can and do have my own opinion, she said just before that. So, what's your take?
Yeah, I think this is once again evidence that the MAGA movement is not Trump and Trump is not the MAGA movement. You know, we talked about this last time, that there are a few things that united conventional Republicans more than hatred of Biden's policy on Iran or Obama's policy on Iran, right? The Republicans during the Obama administration were basically unified on opposing the Iran deal. And you can say that that Joe Biden had a fairly coherent policy in Asia, bolstering allies and partners and responding to China and trying to maintain bilateral ties with China. But when it came to the Middle East, specifically when it came to Iran, it's hard to say what the Biden policy was after the Biden administration concluded that Iran did not want to go back to the JCPOA, the Iran deal. And so it's fascinating now to see, though, again, that horseshoe theory of politics of the progressive Dems and the MAGA types uniting in opposing this. So the question is this a breaking period? Are we moving forward going to see the Republican Party move more like MAGA, more anti-intervention, or are they going to go back to their roots? And where does the Democratic Party go? That's it. Also, I think as much as we talk about the Republican Party for so long being torn by Trump and the establishment versus the insurrectionists, et cetera, so Democratic Party as well, where do they stand on Israel? It's, in my view, they're only more and more skeptical of Israel. I think some of that you could lay at the feet of perhaps Netanyahu, who has gone out of his way to bolster ties with the Republicans more than the Democrats. But I really have to wonder where we are going to be on Middle East policy in 10 years from now, because I can point to so many aspects of U.S. foreign policy from a structural perspective that I can almost guarantee you are going to continue. But on the Middle East, it's really hard because everything's upside down and both parties are torn by this very issue.
Did you want to go to Barak Ravid now, or?
We can. Just very quickly, because I feel like we have so much left to cover. Just one thing for people wondering about Israeli media and why this guy at Axios is making so many, so much news. He is an Israeli journalist who is also the Axios correspondent, and he does something simple yet very important. What he does is, in my view, he works in both English and Hebrew. For the longest time, there was a division between, if you want to learn about Israel, it's one thing to read the Israeli Hebrew language resources. It's another thing altogether to read the English language resources. Even though Israel is one of those tech literate countries in the world and Google Translate's really good with Hebrew, it's still, there's a division, right? And the English language sources are often not as detailed or as in-depth on domestic issues in Israel as the Hebrew ones are.
Right.
Barak straddles that divide and actually does both Hebrew and English. And just to give you an insight into the significance of this, there is a man in Israeli politics named Lapid, Yair Lapid, and he was basically the official leader of the Israeli opposition, a former television journalist and actor, and he got into politics like a decade ago, and he founded a centrist party, and he became prime minister of Israel in 2022. And he was seen as someone who could basically take down Netanyahu. And he's still a member of the Knesset, and after October 7, 2023, he joined Netanyahu's cabinet. And he called for new elections to replace the government, and he endorsed two-state solution. And, the opposition in Israel is pretty limited. But anyways, what I find really interesting is he gave, just to give you context for the significance of this, he gave an interview to the New York Times. And that I think is really gives you an insight into this. Here's the quote. "As a political leader, I'm worried, but a different kind of worried because I don't think we have the right leadership to handle the moment. I feel a little uncomfortable discussing this in English with the New York Times because traditionally we used to say, no, we're not going to get into Israeli politics while dealing with the international media, but this is so extreme and so painful, and on top of this, I feel misunderstood." Barak is one of the few journalists right now who is reporting on both Israel and the U.S., and so we are getting more insights into the Netanyahu government, in my view, than I'm accustomed to getting in the English language. And Barak, I think, has been very effective at getting scoops and sharing scoops in both languages that have informed us far more about domestic politics than I'm accustomed to.
To comment on that in Axios language, scoop. Behind the curtain.
Very good. Very good. I just and if I want to know what's going on in Israeli politics in English, I go to Barak Ravid.
Yeah.
And he gets scoops in both the U.S. and Israel, which is pretty rare. I don't know any other journalist who does it.
You're totally right. Axios have been owning this area, and that's probably why.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Keep on going. New York Mayor. We've had requests to talk about this, so the Peppers want it.
And the Peppers shall receive it.
Mm-hmm.
So the New York mayor, we obviously there's the Democratic primary that just occurred. We just got the results in the last 24 hours, and it seems that Mamdani has won it. What is significant about Mamdani, in addition to the fact that he very well may be the first a Muslim mayor, he very well may be the first Indian American mayor. He is also 33 years old and has endless ambition. He comes to office with clearly a lot of rhetorical skills. He is an exceptional orator, maybe not the level of Barack Obama, but still he knows how to get a viral moment in debates with his opponents. He was effective. And his messaging was just really on point. And I think the context for this that I think we need to appreciate is how New York had a string of more conservative mayors. We had
Bloomberg,
Giuliani.
Yeah.
Then we had Bloomberg.
Yeah.
And then New York went more progressive and went left wing with de Blasio. And now we have our favorite Eric Adams. What has changed, though, is that crime in New York, there are varying statistics, but crime, especially on the subway, has gotten worse. And New Yorkers are, even though more people are moving to New York than ever, and it's actually popular, still the level of crime in New York right now, it reminds people of the 1980s and when the subway was seen as lawless. And so basically you have the combination of that, and you also have the combination of long simmering tensions about affordability of the city and how just property and housing is getting so impossible to achieve in New York City. And then we have this young, charismatic speaker who with very loud and pointed views on the Middle East. Again, what the significance of the New York mayor to the Middle East is maybe not something I think is that critical, but another point altogether. But at the same time, what's really interesting to me as a New Yorker is the fact that Andrew Cuomo comes in, swoops in, and runs against Mamdani for the Democratic nomination. And the way that this is, talking about before, how Iran has shown the sort of cleavages in the Democratic Party, this race has also shown the cleavages in the Democratic Party. How, again, in 2017, we saw Nancy Pelosi as the face of the opposition when Trump was elected, and right now the Dems still don't have a face of the opposition. And so we have a choice in New York. We had a choice, at least the Democrats had a choice, for what that opposition looks like. Is it a young, charismatic, non-white, progressive 33-year-old, or is it a well-known scion of New York, Andrew Cuomo, the son of a former governor of New York? And let's not forget why Andrew Cuomo is no longer the governor of New York, because he resigned thanks to sexual assault allegations against him, which he admitted and now is denying.
He's backtracked. There are 11 women who had sexual assault allegations.
So he can technically say less than a dozen.
He can say that while that's the reason he resigned, but there were many other knocks on him other than that. Like, I mean, that's true. That is why he resigned, because he was about to get impeached because of these sexual harassment allegations.
By a Democratic majority in the Senate.
That's right. But yeah, also he was the shine was coming off him rapidly in hindsight with COVID about the number of senior citizens dying in nursing homes in New York because he moved them there when they had COVID. There's a knock on him about the fact that he's been very credibly accused of perjuring himself in testimony to Congress as well, and he was considered to be a vengeful bully. So there's all them.
It's the last one in particular that really gets the Dems, because once they saw that he was weak, so many of these Dems who have been burned by him because he has been so vengeful said, yes, finally. Yeah. And that's one of the many reasons why he was no longer the governor. But the what I find really interesting, though, is right now, change always sells in politics in the U.S. in particular right now. There's a lot of dissatisfaction. Yeah. But what they were offering, I think, is really interesting. So Mamdani was saying, I'm going to be younger, I'm going to change things, but made a big focus of the cost of living, saying this is not good enough. This is we need radical solutions. And he is undoubtedly the most progressive mayor that we've had that we may have. Yeah. I think more progressive than de Blasio. At the same time, then you had Cuomo saying, I'm a safe pair of hands, and I can help deal with this crime issue. With that said, there's also a lot of baggage because Cuomo was governor of New York and famously was pretty ruthless in his engagements with the city. There's always a tension between Albany, the capital of New York, which not many people realize is the capital, and New York City. Obviously, New York City takes all the attention, but the rest of the Empire State feels abandoned and ignored. But as governor, he was not New York City's best friend. But yeah, the fact, though, that there are two tracks here, and I think what Mamdani successfully did to win this Democratic primary is show himself as the change candidate, and saying actually experience of Cuomo hurts because he is status quo. And you could say similarly with Harris. She was Kamala Harris, and why she lost, it is the status quo. Whoever is painted as more status quo in America right now seems to be losing. Yeah, that's probably true. He certainly suggested change. He had some interesting policies, like the one which like a few highlights for you guys. It was to construct 200,000 units of housing over 10 years. That's kind of, to be honest, that's not much of a promise. Like that's just what happens in New York. Yeah. But anyway, a rent freeze for all rent-stabilized apartments. Yeah, I mean, that's populist fare, which probably would lead to fewer new properties being built. But anyway, let's leave that aside. It's not Economist Hour. Creating city-owned grocery stores. Now that's a pretty wild promise. City-owned grocery stores. That's for cost of living. That was one of his solutions for the cost of living because food costs so much. Now, I don't want this to be bash the socialist moment, but honestly, this goes against every libertarian fiber in your body.
That's such a stupid policy. me and Thomas Massey, we are going to be in a corner over there talking about how dumb a policy it is. Do you realize what the profit margin is on food groceries? Like 1%. How are you going to? when he has his government-owned grocery stores, are they going to be union workers? I bet they are. Does he reckon he's going to undercharge like some first-generation migrant in a bodega who's getting 1% profit? There's just no chance. Like the grocery stores are going to be more expensive, and they'll be competing against those migrants. It's not like Walmart's in the middle of New York. This is such a dumb policy. Sorry, you go on.
I deliberately did not mention the specific policies because I thought you'd have a rage fest against each and every one of them.
No, I'll tell you. I'll be fair. Free childcare. I'm not I'm not a socialist, but as far as socialist policies goes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Free childcare makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
He's got free childcare up to 5 years old. I think it costs at $5 billion a year. If he can find the money, which he wants to raise taxes on rich people, so there's your money. Sure, that is going to help poor people go to work. That's what that's going to do, not to mention be good for the culture. So there you go. I can give him that. That's as far as I'm going to go.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of socialized solutions that a lot of governments have concluded, including childcare and healthcare. But I think for me, as someone, fourth generation New Yorker, I think the most significant is the rent freezes. I think every study that I've seen has not shown that to be helpful. No. And we've seen studies across the U.S. of how that actually makes things worse and less affordable. And you, even as a tangible example of this, I lived in Brooklyn, and I remember there's this in Brooklyn. You like a lot of New York, you have these walk-ups, right? You don't have elevators. That's how old some of these places are. There's no elevators. You just have to walk up 4 or 5 flights. And I remember there's just one woman who she was at least in her late 80s, and she had a walker, and she'd go to her apartment she was in Williamsburg, and she would just stand there with her walker and her groceries and wait for someone to come by to help her bring her groceries up her 3-floor walk up. And then she'd similarly like go down and have them like do multiple steps. And she just goes up, and then they go up and down and get all the groceries. And I was just thinking, like, the tax on the community, that you're just assuming someone's always going to do this for you. And it's just like, what if no one's there? What if like Hurricane Sandy hits and no one's walking around? Like the reason she was there is that she was paying pennies for her rent, right? Yeah. It warps the market in a way that is unnatural. Yeah. And because it would be, and then it gets to maybe the social safety net, the lack of like a nursing home available for her. But even beyond that, just the housing that if you're literally paying, a few dollars in rent a month, why would you leave?
Yeah, and the people who have the rent control apartments are almost always middle class white people. They're not the poor migrants. They're not the first generationers. Anyway, let's not worry about that. He's got some socialist policies. Let's Let's keep talking about the race. Oh, I got a quote here on Cuomo when we're talking about the vengeful bully, which when we moved past it, but I just saw it here. I thought I've got to share this because it's quite fun. This was what an anonymous state legislator said to Politico. When Cuomo asked directly for an endorsement, the lawmaker said, this is a quote from Politico I'm reading. When Cuomo asked directly for an endorsement, the lawmaker said, it sounded like he was on a vengeance campaign. It didn't sound like this was a campaign focused on working people, but revitalizing the Cuomo brand. Then after the lawmaker refused to endorse him, the threat started. Cuomo's top aides contacted the lawmaker to suggest, quote, I would live to regret my decision, the lawmaker said. Who threatens people before an election?
You only have to look at the way that Albany has functioned in the past and how many disgraced governors there are to see that sort of behavior is not surprising whatsoever.
Yeah.
I would encourage folks to look at some recent mayors in New York, recent governors in New York's history to see that they have not exactly been the most model citizens.
And we should also say about Cuomo, he's got a $25 million super PAC. That's a third of it is just from Bill Ackman, the hedge fund manager, Daniel Loeb, and Mike Bloomberg. And Bill Ackman's there because of Israel, presumably, because you alluded to it, but didn't get into detail. Mamdani has, while condemning anti-Semitism, condemning violence, condemning all that kind of stuff, he has basically shrugged at stuff like globalize the Intifada and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And he has supported the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. He's called for Benjamin Netanyahu to be arrested. And he has, in, I think, 2023, he introduced a bill to end the tax-exempt status of New York charities that have ties to Israeli settlements for perception of international human rights law violations. He is quite left on the Israel-Gaza issue.
Bill Ackman doesn't like him. Okay, so all right, so that's our contest. But yeah, and obviously Mamdani won. I know. There's another area though you want to go into in this election.
Yes.
So why don't you go there?
Thank you. One of the reasons why Mamdani won, not the sole reason, but he won thanks to ranked choice voting, or what you Aussies call preferential voting. And this is something that is an experiment. New York only started doing this in the last few years. Their last election that Eric Adams won was the first time, and he won thanks to ranked choice voting because he didn't win a majority. Usually in the U.S., it's first past the post.
Yeah.
This ranked choice voting is currently used in 63 different U.S. jurisdictions, including party primaries, states, counties, cities, and 52 jurisdictions if you exclude the party primaries. What I've seen thus far, in my view, is that in this populist era of getting extremely polarizing candidates, they don't do well in ranked choice voting. Sarah Palin famously lost her seat, a bid for a seat in Congress in Alaska, thanks to ranked choice voting. And the two swingiest Republicans left in the Senate are Lisa Murkowski in Alaska, Susan Collins in Maine.
Yes.
What do those two states have in common beyond sandwiching Canada? They also have ranked choice voting.
And look, in the main case, in the Susan Collins case, I reckon she'd still be the rep even without ranked choice voting. But Murkowski absolutely would not. Murkowski definitely, like 2 elections back, only got through because of ranked choice voting.
100%. Yep. And they keep taking it from Trump for not aligning with him enough. But that ranked choice voting has enabled moderate politicians in these states to be in office, and more polarizing politicians like Sarah Palin to not get into office. So we have someone at the U.S. Study Center named Ben Riley, who's an authority on this topic, who I'd encourage folks to read, who has spoken extensively on this and actually worked with states implementing ranked choice voting. And what I find really I personally think it is a policy that makes sense, and it sort of quells polarizing, more extreme options. But the fact that Sarah Palin lost and it has led to skeptical Trump voters means that Republicans are not keen on ranked choice voting. The Wall Street Journal editorial page in particular is not keen on ranked choice voting. Please.
No, I was going to say, there are states that have outlawed it. Like they're put in their constitution, you can't have ranked choice voting. Red states, obviously.
Yeah. So ranked choice voting initiatives have failed in a number of states, despite big pushes. And do you know how Alaska voted about whether to keep their ranked choice voting? Do you know what the vote was?
Oh, I know, it was real close. I was watching it so carefully. This is the last election. I reckon in the end it might have been, was it 500 votes that did it?
I don't know the exact number. I know it was 50.1%.
Yeah. It was real close. And it only just got up in the end. Like as in it was down until several days past the election.
So it's failed in other states like Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, Oregon, Montana, South Dakota. So why do I bring this all up? Because the New York primary was run on a ranked choice voting platform, and I have to wonder if now centrist Dems, many of whom do not like Mamdani, are now going to start to turn away from ranked choice voting. There's not a lot of polling on ranked choice voting and perceptions of it, but just reading what people are saying about it and seeing how frustrated people are that it has resulted in Mamdani winning instead of a Cuomo, who is seen as a more moderate candidate. regardless of his baggage. And even the New York Times gave a non-endorsement to Cuomo, despite leading many of breaking the scoops about his allegations. I think that this may be the beginning of some distrust in ranked choice voting on the left instead of just on the right.
See, that would suck. And I'll tell you why that would suck. Not only do I agree with you that ranked choice voting is very good, and so that I don't want that, but on top of that, I thought it did a really good job. Like if you have a look at the effect that ranked choice voting had on this race, I mean, number one, the reason Cuomo did worse out of ranked choice voting than Mandami was because people hate Cuomo. And ranked choice voting stops the people who are hated.
Who would have thought that a governor that had an antagonistic relationship with New York City would then be hated by its voters?
Totally. But in the polling, it looked like a potential, from a first post past the post perspective, a potential injustice in that Cuomo was up in the polls by like 10 points, and then Mamdani was just getting up over him because of ranked choice voting. But in reality, I'm behind as always, but it didn't. Mamdani beat him in the actual vote.
Yeah. Mamdani might end up getting 50%.
So in that case, first past the post.
Yeah.
Mamdani would have won anyway. So they can't blame ranked choice voting for that. But also on top of that, ranked choice voting, if you look at what happened, it tells you where the polls are going. Like it tells you, so the polls tell you where the election is going. In that you can see the ranked choice voting because Mamdani was catching up so much on the second, third, fourth, fifth rank. That was telling New Yorkers, if you like Cuomo, you're going to have to not put Mamdani so high up in your rankings. And people thought about it. They thought, no, actually, we just don't like Cuomo. And so he won more first votes as a result. Like, I think it actually influenced the race to make it more indicative of people's preferences.
Yep.
Like, I think it gives you more information. I think also it makes other candidates be more relevant. Because in a normal race, when there's 6 people or however many there were, as soon as you know the horse race, you ignore everyone else. They're irrelevant. But in New York, people cared about Landa right to the end because they want to know who Landa was going to preference.
And sorry, we should clarify who that is, who is a progressive assembly member as well.
Yeah. He's the guy, Brad Landa's the guy we talked about last week who got arrested by ICE. That guy there, the boring guy. But he would have been completely ignored in a normal election.
Yeah.
But with ranked choice, he was relevant to the end. Even these complete nobodies were relevant to the end. It really creates more democracy. It creates more democratic interest. It creates more democratic enthusiasm. It creates more choice. And I think it works really well. I think the media hate it because it makes the race less straightforward and less easy to construct a narrative around, which is their job.
Mm-hmm.
I think from a Democratic point of view, I think it keeps the race alive, and I think that's really good. And it's not a huge mystery. People are like, oh, it's such a mystery how it works, but if you don't like it in the polls, you see polls. If you don't like the way it's going, you switch your preferences. It's really easy. So I mean, you're probably right, but I hope you're wrong because that would be an injustice, and God, I love it.
And we should also say that there's the general election in November.
Yes, I'll jump in on this one because there's something which I think is a bit dumb. And it's not ranked choice voting. It's the way New York runs their general elections, which is fusion voting. What fusion voting for is when a candidate appears on the general election ballot under the column of every single party that nominates them, and they can be nominated by more than one party. Yes, that's right. So, for instance, Mamdani could be the Working Families candidate, Working Families Party candidate, and the Democrats candidate. So he's there twice. It's called fusion because you fuse the votes together and they add up all the votes that you get in total and put them together. You might go, how's that work with preferential? It's not preferential. The general election is not preferential or ranked choice. It's just the primary. So so it's first past the post, but they get you to you might be in 6 different parties, and then you're listed there, and whatever vote you get for any of those 6 parties is added together as your total vote. That's how Fusion works. Now, the reason why I think it's a bit dumb is because anyone can register their own party, which is what Andrew Cuomo did, of course, because he's that kind of dodgy dude. And so he registered the Fight and Deliver Party, which means that the primary that just happened is irrelevant. They're going to be running against each other again in the general election. Like, the general election is going to be Cuomo in the Fight and Deliver Party. Eric Adams is an independent. You might wonder what happened to him, the current mayor. He's running as independent.
He has 20% approval rating, which I'm impressed. To be honest, I'm impressed it's in the double digits. Sure. With that said, we should clarify it's the lowest job approval rating of any New York City mayor in the history of Quinnipiac's polling of New York City.
Well, 20% might be okay for him if he gets that, because there's 5 candidates, at least 5. And there's Mandami now, who's the Democrat and working families. The Republican, Curtis Silva, who's the Guardian Angels dude, yeah? And Adam smacked him in 2021. And there's the centrist independent, Jim Walden. So there's 5 candidates. No ranked choice, which means they can split the vote, which means Cuomo might end up winning in a canter because the rest of the vote might get split, or Mandami might win in a canter. I don't know how this is going to work, to be honest. I don't know New York politics enough. Do you have a theory of how the split works?
No, I don't know. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I don't know exactly what Cuomo's going to do next or how he's going to play it. There's a lot of options. And we also, there's a lot of focus on the Democratic primary, but, Republicans have won, including Giuliani and Bloomberg. So we know who the Republican nominee is, but I'm just saying, and Republicans have been, as we've said before, running up the score in New York. And getting closer and closer to making it almost a purple state.
When there's 3 Democrats there, and 1 independent and 1 Republican, the Republican can easily win. This is why ranked choice voting makes sense, and this stupid fusion system does not. But anyway, so anything could happen in the general election. Like, they just wasted their time with this primary. They really did. Like, it's just, it's such an infuriating system. So anyway, so that's the way the New York system works. Oh, I should also say, by the way, this has happened before. Buffalo in 2021, there was a socialist who won then, similar to Mandami. Her name was India Walton. She beat the sitting mayor in the Democratic primary, Byron Brown, not Brian Brown, Byron Brown. And Byron Brown, because he's just sore loser, ran as a write-in candidate at the last second and took in a whole heap of corporate cash. And he beat her in the general election. That final result in Buffalo, by the way, to give you an example of just how ridiculous this is, was Byron Brown, 38,000, India Walton, 25,000, top Republican, 219. So that could happen. That could happen again. Although the difference is, I think he took India Walton by surprise at the last second as a riding candidate. Mandami has known for months that Cuomo wasn't going to accept the primary and was going to have his own stupid party. And he's got cash coming out of the wazoo. So, like Mandami I'm talking about. So it's going to be a big cash race, this one, the general election, between those two at the very least. You got more thoughts? Or?
I just think that in terms of cash, we've seen time and time again that as much as there is so much cash in the U.S. political system, at the same time, we've seen time and time again the fact that cash doesn't always get you everything you want. If it were only a cash thing, then Trump would not have won 2016, the Republican nomination, or 2024. And both times he had less than his opponents, but he just had more political support. And so I think cash is something very easy for journalists to focus on because they have to disclose how much they've raised, and then it is a horse race, right? You have this guy raising this much, this guy raising that much, this woman raising this much, et cetera, And so that's it. But we should not overplay cash being anywhere close to synonymous with actual popular support.
Polling time. That's my self-sting. This is a bit of a surprise for you. I did tell you one of the things we're talking about, but I didn't tell you one of the other things. This is cool. Latino polling, just very quickly. We've heard a lot about Republicans doing better in polling amongst Latinos in the last few years. Sorry, I wasn't trying to sandbag you here. I just put it in there as the last second thought. This is great. Now, that may be reversing itself right now about Latinos and Republicans with the whole ICE stuff. All this profiling of Hispanics. By the way, for those who don't know about this, I'm sure Jared does, Equus polling is an example. There's a heap of them. In May, had Latinos agreeing by a 66 to 29% margin that Trump's actions are going too far and targeting the types of immigrants who strengthen our nation. It's not very popular with the Latinos, especially given that they're racially profiling them. But there is something you should bear in mind about Latino polling, which I've never even thought about. But then as I read that, I thought, of course, Republicans are doing better amongst Latinos than you think. And the reason they're doing better than you think is because according to the Cooperative Election Study that interviewed 6,000 Americans in 2020 and 2024, that's a big study, 6% of people who identified as of Hispanic origin in 2020 did not identify that way in 2024. The same people they spoke to. It's not numbers here. It's the exact same people. 6% no longer identified as Latino 4 years later. Note, that's different to saying their race is Hispanic. More people say their origin is Hispanic than their race is Hispanic. They're two different things. And a fair few people went from saying their race was Hispanic in 2020 to just saying their origin was Hispanic in 2024. In fact, 16% of Hispanics did that. They went from saying their race was Hispanic to their origin. So they were downgrading their Hispanic nature.
Yep.
But anyway, amongst those who selected Hispanic as their race in both 2020 and 2024, Trump trailed by 1.8 percentage points in the election. Amongst those who selected their race as Hispanic in 2020, but only origin as Hispanic in 2024, so they downgraded it, Trump trailed by about 1 percentage point, about the same. Amongst those who selected their origin as Hispanic in 2020 and then de-identified as Hispanic in 2024, Trump won them by 31 points.
Wow.
Those people are not counted in the 2024 Hispanic vote because they've de-identified, which means Trump has converted 3 or 4 points more Hispanic voters from 2020 than you think he has.
I love this because to me, do you know what this symbolizes?
What's that?
The American dream.
Ooh.
They're becoming American and they identify as American more than they identify as anything else. We used to talk about the Polish vote, the Catholic vote, all this stuff. And we can't box people in. And I love that about America.
Absolutely. Look, I don't want to toot my own horn, but this is something that for when we started playing America in 2012, literally it was almost the second or third episode of the show. I did a little breakout right at that moment, saying those people who, because they were talking about the Hispanic vote then, and I said, when you talk about the Hispanic vote, just realize in 10 years, in 20 years, they're not going to be the Hispanic vote anymore. They're just going to be white. And I spoke that from experience from my own family. And I said, like my dad was Italian and I'm not. Yeah. It doesn't take long. For the so-called minority to suddenly become white.
Yeah.
Like their skin doesn't change.
Yep.
They just get acculturated and just part of the country. It's and accepted. So anyway, I totally agree. This is actually just off the top of my head. An amazing stat. Take a guess. Here we go. Here's a guessing time. The percentage of Los Angeles Hispanic voters in 2024, so who are newly registered voters, newly registered Hispanic voters in Los Angeles in 2024. Yes. Newly registered, so I didn't prepare this obviously, Hispanic voters in Los Angeles in 2024 who were born overseas.
30%.
9%.
Wow.
91% of newly registered Hispanic voters in Los Angeles in 2024 were born in America.
That's a great stat.
Yeah, it is cool.
What's the total number? Do you know?
Don't know. But yeah,
And we should also highlight how much Republicans have been courting Hispanics.
Yeah.
Since Reagan, right?
Yeah,
Reagan famously said that Hispanics are conservative. They just don't know it.
yes.
And he also, like what he said about Hispanics also makes us cringe now. He said, they demonstrate the importance of real work, producing things of real value, building communities of shared values that enrich America and keep us strong and free. Now it makes us sort of cringe, like, what? Yeah. Like they're human, you know? Yeah. But yeah, no, this has been a deliberate effort. We shouldn't forget in George W. Bush's era,
2004.
Yeah. Highlighting Jeb Bush's son, who's mixed heritage and speaks Spanish, and how Bush would literally play "Livin' La Vida Loca" as one of his campaign songs to just really court that Hispanic vote. So there is a greater, just like so many other immigrant communities, a higher level of entrepreneurship in the Hispanic community, and it played quite nicely with the Republican small government mentality.
It's a great segue as well you deliver there, Joe, because you know who else living La Vida Loca would appeal to? The gay vote, which introduces us to the bit which we were talking about before, which is this June marks the 10th anniversary of Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court case that held that gay marriage was legal across America. Back in 2015, I guess, 10th anniversary. You'd think, and at that point in time, gay marriage became extremely popular. We've got some graphs from Gallup to show you this, and this is why it's polling time, because the graphs actually have taken a very interesting shape. If we look at that first one behind you there, Jared, this is America's support for same-sex marriage. You can see that this is divided by parties, and it was quite low right across the board back in 1997. Democrats were 30%. The independents were the dotted line. They're about 30%. Republicans are about 15%, and it's been gradually going up. But you'll notice what happened after 2015. It kept on going up through, with all three of them. But then something happened in 2022. Look at that red line in 2022. For those who are listening rather than watching, what happened was in 2022, support amongst Republicans was 55%. But therefore, this is for gay marriage. But then in 2023, it dipped to 49%. In 2024, it dipped to 46%. And last month, it stood at 41%, the smallest share since 2016. It's only going backwards amongst Republicans. Amongst independents, it's still kind of trending up, although almost flat line at 76%. Democrats, it's still going up. It's at 88%, still going up. But the Republicans have... Really, they're flying down.
Why do you think they are?
Well, just before I ask you that, let me show you a second graph, because you might think it's a marriage thing. No, it's not a marriage thing. It's a gay thing, because here's a second graph: Americans' views over whether same-sex relations are morally acceptable. No marriage here. Look at the Republicans since 2022. Same thing again. 56% of Republicans said gay and lesbian relations are morally acceptable in 2022. In 2023, it went from 56 to 41%. In 2024, it went to 40%, and now it's at 38%, the lowest level since 2013. Okay, so there is an obvious trend here, and it's only amongst Republicans. Back to your question, why? Do you want me to start, or do you want to start?
I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Okay, I've got a bunch of theories on this one. One thing, because I'm thinking 2022, what happened in 2022? Abortion happened in 2022. The Dobbs case happened in 2022. So that might have encouraged religious people who had secretly maybe not been a big fan of social liberalism, but thought they were scared of being called bigots and monsters and all that. They might have just thought, hang on, we can win this thing. This is actually possible. We won the abortion thing. Maybe we can win this thing. And they suddenly got a bit more confident, a little bit cocky, and a little bit more willing to share an opinion that they secretly held before then. And maybe there's been some momentum in the other direction since then. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that 2022, that's around about the time that Republicans started hating on trans people, and maybe they associate trans with gay. They've linked the two, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And some people have maybe some people confuse the two issues. They just associate them together. So that could be it. Another thing that happened in 2022, big time 2022, the Ron DeSantis era happened in 2022, where woke goes to die. That's when he became Mr. Anti-Woke. He wasn't anti-woke before then, but he just decided right about 2022, then I'm going to be Mr. Anti-Woke. And that became a thing amongst Republicans. This, oh, no, we're not politically correct anymore. We're just going to say what we think and stuff you all. So maybe that's the same kind of thing as I was just saying with the abortion, where they were starting to say things they've been secretly thinking and maybe even encouraged now to say. So that's another one. And then, some people will say Trump. I don't think it's Trump because you look at the first term of Trump and they were going up the whole time. So I don't think it's necessarily Trump. And it was also just halfway through when Biden was in office, so I don't think that's really a Trump thing. So I'd rule that out. I'd say those three that I've already said are likely, but I actually think that there is another one which I actually think is possibly more likely, although the sharp turn at 2022 is interesting. So I think one of those three factors I just said is probably part of it, possibly combination. But I also think that when you ask what's causing this, you're assuming the causation goes in that direction, not the other direction. But I feel like we've been in a period, around that period, like during the Biden era, of extreme partisan sorting, like after COVID, which, remember, ended 2022. Yeah, the extreme partisan sorting where people who until then were not Republicans became Republicans, and people who were not Democrats became Democrats based on their views. Yep. They saw themselves. So maybe it's not what turned the Republicans anti-gay. It's what made the anti-gay people all decide to become Republicans. Like maybe that was a period where culturally people who lined up with, especially in the South and in the rural areas, with those kinds of attitudes, just said, well, I have to be a Republican now. And they became Republican. It doesn't. We only talk about 5%, 6%. So maybe it's the other way around. They're all my theories.
I think your last one is the one I subscribe to the most, because I think when I talk to other Americans about their political ideology, and I try to guess based on what they talk about, and as soon as I hear my job is literally to talk about U.S. politics, then it's every Uber driver and taxi driver in the world, But what I find really interesting is I listen to what are their grievances, what are they happy about, and the number one wedge for there's one issue voters, they care about Iran or Israel or taxes, but that to my mind is decreasing. What I'm seeing, the number one wedge is not financial, it is not foreign policy, it is cultural. And so exactly what you were saying, I think culturally we are distancing the parties more and more. When I look at people who voted for Trump, who almost voted for Trump, and who voted for Harris, I just have to hear their thoughts on different cultural ideas, and then I have like a 90% accuracy rate in terms of where they landed. And that's it. It's sad to see America divided by culture. Like I was saying before, outside of the Super Bowl, there's not much culturally that unites us in the same way. We don't have one television event. Obviously, technology changes, culture changes, but I'm hoping that the U.S. will not continue down this path of cultural divisions between the parties.
And so do you think that 2022 was a big year for cultural division?
Exactly. Yeah. You nailed it. It was COVID, right? And it just got worse and worse and worse. Right? And so the headline for this is not that the U.S. some in America are becoming less receptive to just gay Americans, gay relations between same-sex relations. I think the number one divide is just polarization.
Yeah.
That's it. And the polarization is a function of cultural polarization and vice versa. And it's just that cultural and political divide is just pulling America to live in two different ecosystems and oftentimes echo chambers. And it's really frustrating.
Yeah, I agree. That's another area where we're twins. Jared, we both hate that.
It plays to our worst impulses. And again, going back to our thing about ranked choice voting, the more polarizing candidate often does not win with ranked choice voting. But first past the post, what drives them to the vote, again, not only does the U.S. not have ranked choice voting, but the U.S. usually doesn't have ranked choice voting. The U.S. also doesn't have compulsory voting. And so you're always trying to outrage people out to the voting booth. You're coming to the voting booth because you're so angry about X, right? Or I can't even say that anymore. So angry about X, Y, or Z. Because some people actually are angry about X and what's to come. But yeah, and it's, I don't like the outrage and the cultural divisions, but America has obviously suffered far worse divisions than the one it's suffering right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into immigration. Oh, Lockie, you're going to have to do some editing, I'm afraid. Let's start with a little bit of toilet break to get us in the mood. This is Kristi Noem's ad that has been running on air recently, and oh my God, it requires no introduction.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Under President Trump, attempted illegal border crossings are at the lowest levels ever recorded, and over 100,000 illegal aliens have been arrested. If you are here illegally, you're next. You will be fined nearly $1,000 a day, imprisoned, and deported. You will never return. But if you register using our CBP Home app and leave now, you could be allowed to return legally. Do what's right. Leave now. Under President Trump, America's laws, border, and families will be protected.
Oh my God, it's like something like Starship Troopers.
That's so true. I didn't even think of that.
I'm going to ask you a simple question. We know the story they've been selling, ICE. I've been talking about how horrible ICE are for weeks now.
Yeah.
And, we know the story they've been selling, that they're getting rid of the worst of the worst. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Would you care to guess what percentage of arrestees have violent convictions this fiscal year?
5%.
Pretty good. He's pretty good. 6.9%. Yeah. And let's throw in property crime as well. That's another 3.7%. So combined with violent crime. Yeah, exactly. Combined with violent crime, you got 10.6%.
Yeah. I heard that 10% stat, but I didn't know violent crime. Yeah.
There we are. Most of their convictions, to the extent there are convictions, were either traffic or immigration charges, obviously. That's your worst of the worst.
And it polls better than any other topic. Do you want violent illegal immigrants to be deported? Yes.
Yeah. But I want to talk about two seemingly unrelated stories when it comes to immigration and then put them together. A whole bunch of, in my view, really good programs ended last week from the Biden era. There were things that I had a lot of problems with the Biden immigration agenda. I know we've talked about this before, but there were some things I thought they did that was smart, and they're now gone. First of all, the CHNV parole program, which I was always a big fan of. What the CHNV parole program was a parole program for people from Cuba, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Started in 2022 and 2023. These were the carrots that were being offered to reduce illegal immigration rather than just having sticks. To get one of these applications, you needed to find a private sponsor, I know, a libertarian, who is willing to let you stay at their place and will help you get a job and will look after you and help you assimilate. You need to pass security vetting to get this parole. You need to pay for your own flight. The government's not spending a cent on you. And if you do that, if you do all those things, and you're coming from a country which is screwed up, which is why you're allowed to have a parole, you get a work visa to support yourself. These people, you get 2 years with this work visa. These people cost the American government no money. They last 2 years, then they can reapply. If they're dodgy, they're not going to get it. And if they're not dodgy, then they're contributing to the country. Why wouldn't you keep them? What's wrong with having people who are fleeing from a dodgy nation who want to contribute to your country? To me, it's a win-win. There was a similar program for Ukraine and for Afghanistan parolees as well. Now, I do think the Republicans fairly noted at the time that these temporary paroles tended to get renewed a lot. And they were wondering whether they were very strictly enforced. Sure, strictly enforce it. I don't have problems with that. But the system itself, I thought, made sense. And yes, there are quite a few of these people now. There are 530,000 of these people. I think they also fairly note from a legal point of view that these parole programs are meant to be case by case and urgent, but people aren't usually judged on a case by case basis. If they can satisfy the conditions, they kind of automatically qualify because of their nationality. I get that. Anyway, the Trump administration tried to end the program immediately. They claimed there was widespread fraud. I don't know about that. They made a lot of hay out of a few program members being arrested for child rapes to suggest there were 530,000 child rapists out there. They paused applications and then it went to the courts. U.S. District Judge Indira Tawani ruled the Trump administration had to temporarily resume processing applications for migrants in the program while the case was heard. She's an Obama appointee. No one disputes, by the way, that under federal law, Kristi Noem has broad authority to grant or revoke parole status. She definitely does. The question is whether Noem can revoke the status for 530,000 people at the stroke of a pen, which is what they wanted to do. Or if she needs to review them on a case-by-case basis, like they thought they should be built up on. The Supreme Court, Tawani said they couldn't do that. They said it was arbitrary. She said it was arbitrary and capricious to get rid of all of them at once. The Supreme Court disagreed. The Supreme Court, there were two dissenters, Sotomayor and Jackson. They let the administration. They said the administration could suspend the program, but the majority said they could suspend the parole program. And so it is being suspended. They allowed the administration to expedite deportations for people who were part of the program. It wasn't a final ruling, but as soon as they made this temporary ruling, the administration said, right, you're all gone. Immediately. Jackson dissented. She didn't question that Trump is likely to prevail in the full case, but she said that the court shouldn't temporarily strip these immigrants of protection because that was effectively permanently stripping them of protection, which is exactly what happened. So basically, she doesn't like dispensing temporary injunctions on the shadow docket lightly. And this comes over and over again. Because these show doc decisions are meant to be temporary. They only make them for, they don't even hear the case. They just make a snap judgment. A few days later, they go, yeah, okay. So there's no thought put into it. There's no reasons given. It's just an instantaneous knee-jerk reaction. That's not how courts are meant to work, says Jackson. And to be fair, she's very consistent on that. She's always said that. Then what happened was DHS began to notify the 530,000 migrants, this is last week, that their parole has been formally revoked. And now they are all deportable. And they've got all their names and all their addresses. And unlike when they need to go to Walmart or whatever, or Home Depot or whatever to pick up people, they can just go to their house and pick them up easily. It's the easiest pickup in the world. And these people they're not criminals. They've just got jobs and just constructive members of society, but they're easy deportations and they're sitting ducks for ICE when they have a 3,000 person quota a day to fill out. This is where we're at the moment with this program being ended.
As you and David have highlighted numerous times, this incentivizes people not being forthcoming with their details and not being law-abiding citizens.
Yeah.
The more that you punish the people who file the paperwork simply because you're too incompetent to find the people who didn't file paperwork, the more people will not file paperwork.
Yes.
This is incentivizing bad behavior on so many fronts.
Absolutely.
Simply because, is it incompetence or laziness that they can't find the other ones, right? Frustrating.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there are also two temporary protection status programs that have been ended at the same time, one in Venezuela and one in Afghanistan. The temporary protection status for Venezuelans, 350,000 of them, have been allowed to remain in the United States under the Biden administration. This is another one where Republicans are going, you just keep on re-extending it over and over and over again. That's fair. That is true. They do keep on re-extending it over and over again. But once again, you could, on a case-by-case basis, revoke, but no, put a line through all of them. That's what's happened. The Supreme Court allowed this revocation on a temporary basis. It's effectively permanent. Very similar. Jackson dissented for exactly the same reason. Say on the shadow docket, you shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. At least wait till you hear the case properly and give them a chance. No reasons are given, but yeah. Okay, and the Afghanistan, similar kind of thing, except for they haven't quite got to this point. They have been revoked on July 14, so I think that's yet to go to the Supreme Court, but that will, and the same thing will happen.
This has been said so many times, but it really does incentivize locals in countries where the U.S. is operating to not cooperate with the U.S. any further, with the fact that they are now kicking out Afghans who helped U.S. forces in Afghanistan, who sacrificed their lives and their home countries, living in their home countries to help U.S. forces. This does not help the U.S. in the long term.
I agree. Although Kristi Noem wants you to know that there's an improved security situation in Afghanistan at the moment, Jared. That's why she approved getting rid of the temporary protection status. The U.S. State Department disagrees a little bit when they tell Americans to do not travel due to armed conflict, civil unrest, crime, terrorism, and kidnapping. Travel to all areas of Afghanistan is unsafe. So there's a little bit of dissension there, but I'm sure Noem's correct. Also, did you know that ISIS and Al Qaeda are still present in Afghanistan as well? Did you know that? And there's a 2023 report by the Human Rights Research League that documented more than 400 revenge killings of individuals with links to the United States or the former Afghan government. Guess what these people are? There's in 2023 alone 200 former Afghan government officials and security personnel who've been extrajudicially killed.
I'm sorry to highlight it, but just as an American who's lived overseas and sensitive to perceptions of America, it is so frustrating when foreigners do the right thing and suffer for it.
Yeah.
These Afghans did everything the Americans wanted them to do.
Yes, they did.
And they did everything by the book. And they did everything correctly, and they're now suffering for, one, doing what the Americans asked them to do, and two, doing their paperwork correctly.
Yeah.
And what this incentivizes, again, sorry to belabor this point, it's frustrating.
No, it is. It is. And look, I know I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but let me just dwell on it for a second, even though the clock is ticking. We can't leave this part of my spiel without mentioning women in particular. They're banned from showing their faces in public in Afghanistan. They must not speak publicly, even to recite the Quran. Education is prohibited for girls over 12. Strict punishments are inflicted on those attending secret home schools. Women are not allowed to work in public. Drivers cannot transport women without a male guardian. Buildings are not to have windows through which it's possible to see areas in the home used by women. 1/3 of Afghan girls are in forced marriages. Underage girls are being sold by their families for food because 2/3 of the population require food assistance to survive. Religious police are empowered to arrest, detain, disappear, and kill women arbitrarily, which is why in 2024 the Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that Afghan women are presumed to face persecution under the Taliban regime solely based on their gender. But according to Kristi Noem, it's an improved security situation in Afghanistan. Just so you know that. Anyway. Okay, so that's the first story. The second story is a Supreme Court case this week involving deportations. An emergency ruling in DHS versus DVD, which I've talked about this case a few times before on the pod, never used its proper name before. It's a South Sudan case. Let me give you the background for those who don't know. America is a signatory to a treaty, the Convention Against Torture. What that means is the government's not allowed to expel, extradite, or otherwise affect the involuntary return of any person to a country in which there are substantial grounds for believing that person to be in danger of being subjected to torture. That's the law. Can't do it. So before a non-citizen is removed from America, they get a hearing with an immigration judge. They're told which countries they might be sent to, and if they fear they might be tortured, they can object to it. Then the immigration judge makes up their mind if their fear is credible. If the judge believes their concern meets the standards of the treaty, they can still be deported, just not to the country they're worried about being tortured or mistreated in. This is what happened with the Brago Garcia famously in El Salvador. The judge found he shouldn't be deported to El Salvador, but he could be deported anywhere else. Okay, so that's how it's meant to work. The problem is, the country that most migrants fear the most, it's usually the one they ran away from. And if you can't send them back there, no other country is usually going to take them. And then America's stuck with them. And that's cramping Steve Miller's style. So the Trump administration came up with a theory to get around this, a loophole, if you will. They were hoping if someone had been found to be a deportable migrant and the government couldn't send them to one country, maybe they could send them to a third country without a hearing. As long as that country has provided diplomatic assurances that aliens removed from the United States will not be persecuted or tortured. So that satisfies the treaty, doesn't it?
That's what South Sudan is famous for.
Yeah, that's right. Well, here's the thing. They tried to send them to El Salvador. They tried Libya. They tried South Sudan. If you think for 5 seconds, the kind of country happy to take random migrants from other countries on America's behalf, they're probably countries that America bribed or blackmailed to do it, which means they're probably fairly dubious countries. So they'll make their promise and then they'll do what they want. This went to the Supreme Court. We had an emergency ruling this week, which means they did not hear the case properly. Yet again, Judge Jackson did not like this. The Supreme Court, they made an order while just for now, while the case is being heard for the next year or so, just temporary. But of course, once people are sent away, they're not coming back, no matter what happens in the case. And the specific case they were adjudicating was, special question was, before the federal government can deport migrants to a country other than the one identified in their original removal proceedings, do they have to provide those migrants with an opportunity to litigate whether they face torture or mistreatment in that third country? The Supreme Court held no, seemingly on a 6-3 basis. Conservatives versus Liberals. We don't know that for a fact. We know the 3 Liberals dissented. There might have been a silent 4th dissenter. We don't know. If you recall, the District Court had held they did have to be given an opportunity. When the government was trying to send 8 migrants to South Sudan against their will, Judge Murphy insisted they be given the opportunity to challenge the deportation. He said they needed 15 days to consider whether they're going to challenge the deportation. If they choose to, they need the opportunity to do so. He placed an injunction forcing the government to not send them to South Sudan until they gave the migrants that opportunity. The government stubbornly kept them in a shipping container in Djibouti for weeks on end, rather than allowing them to come back to America and receive basic due process. And the Supreme Court said, great, you can release them now into South Sudan. What was their logic? There was none. This was the entire discussion. I will read you now. The application for stay presented to Justice Jackson and by her referred to the court is granted. That was it. And then they had a paragraph of legal instructions. What did the dissent say? Sonia Sotomayor wrote the dissent. She wrote 19 pages of fury. She said, first of all, you're only supposed to get emergency relief if you come to the court with clean hands, i.e. you haven't been dodgy. The government in this case was dodgy. I'll give you one example. I could keep on going, but I'm going to save time. I was going to give you all of them. They've clearly been violating injunctions and proceeding in serious bad faith when they sent men to El Salvador 2 days after Judge Murphy had told them not to send them to El Salvador. But he told DHS not to send them to El Salvador. So what DHS did was they moved them to Gitmo. Then they just walked away.
It's Guantanamo in Cuba.
Yeah, Guantanamo Bay. And then the Defense Department supposedly decided without any instruction from DHS to show up, pick them up and take them to El Salvador. But the injunction was only binding DHS, not Defense Department. So the injunction wasn't broken. That kind of thing happened a lot. If you want to read all about it, I'll put in the homework. You can read it. It's quite an infuriating article. They did not have clean hands. And so Sotomayor said you shouldn't reward that kind of behaviour with an injunction victory because then you'll get more of it. More of people clearly flouting the rule of law. Second, she said, when you look at the stakes for both sides, on their side, you're ruining their lives, potentially torturing them. On your side, all you're doing is just stopping you spending a couple of days in court. You're hurting them more than you, so we shouldn't grant the stay. And third, on the merits of the case, she made the point, every person in America is due under the Fifth Amendment due process. You don't lose due process for a third country deportation just because you already had due process for a second country deportation. Whatever country you're about to send them should get due process. I don't want to make too much of this. It's only an emergency ruling, but it was a strange ruling because until then, with the Alien Enemies Act, all that kind of stuff, they really cared about due process at the Supreme Court. It was the only thing they cared about. But now all of a sudden they don't care about due process either. Not making comments, you don't have to make comments. You don't have to give reasons. It's fair. But they weren't out of time. The briefing was on June 5. Their ruling was on June 23. They could have written more than one line in 18 days. Sotomayor wrote 19 pages. They didn't care, especially since this was obviously of the public interest. They're nullifying a treaty, and they just let it happen without giving a reason, just a a fiat. Why this matters. The ruling's going to have obviously massively harmful effects on certain people. Rubio, he had a memo that was leaked out that the Trump administration has threatened dozens of nations with a travel ban if they don't take third country deportation deals. They're the countries that are up for grabs. Like I said, countries that America wants to ban from coming to America. Those countries. All right, most of them are countries with human rights abuses or violence. Right, it's obviously encouraging the administration to become more lawless as well. But most of all, to put these two stories together, there are 1 million new migrants from what I just told you before who are vulnerable to deportation. The people in the parole programs, the people from the temporary protection status, all of them did the right thing. All of them, they've got their addresses. All of them have played by the rules. None of them were illegal immigrants. Every single one of them came by invitation and did what they were meant to do. None of them have all been security vetted. There's no concerns about any of them. They've all got jobs, and those 1 million migrants right now all came from dodgy countries that aren't going to take them back. Which means if they want to deport them, they're going to a third country. So this ruling has just opened up the possibility for the administration to play serious mischief with a large number of these 1 million migrants. Now, they're not going to have enough money to get rid of all of them, even with the big, beautiful bill. And a lot of these people are going to go in hiding. But the Supreme Court just screwed up an awful lot of innocent victims, in my view.
And I think we only have one more day of rulings from the Supreme Court, at least officially, because their last day for sessions is Thursday, the 26th, today. And they always save their spiciest steaks for last, and that's definitely...
Well, we'll see if I'm going to do a 2-week-old Supreme Court run, because this is our final PEP for this bracket. We're back in 2 weeks. I might have to revisit that one. I might have to get permission for a longer than 3-hour PEP, I think, at some point in time.
Exciting.
If the supervisor will allow me, we will find out. That's something you can just. That's our big cliffhanger. Is Chaz going to get 3 hours and 1 second in 2 weeks' time? We will find out. Jared, do you have anything to add about this or any of the other topics we've been talking about?
No, pleasure as always, Chaz. Thanks
Thank
for having me.
you so much. It was an amazing pleasure, and I'm sorry to get you in this express situation.
I was looking forward to at least 5-6 hours. I'm ready for it. I want to break the record.
We might have to do a double PEP together at some
Triple,
point.
Triple, why not?
Why not? You know he will, and you know I will. Until then, have a great 2 weeks, folks. Stay peppy. We'll see you after the break. See you after the break, Lockie. Stay peppy.